The City of Wilmington Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, July 10th, 2024 is called to order. Would you please rise with me and for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please enter into the minutes that Commissioner Collier and Commissioner Woodruff have excused absences for this evening. Mr. Attorney, do we still have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All matters requiring commission action shall be presented to the Planning Commission by the planning staff and the applicant. In situations where planning staff is the applicant, there will be only one presentation. City staff will make the first presentation. The applicant will make the second presentation. Both presentations are limited to 5 minutes each. To maintain an orderly meeting, all presentations shall proceed without interruption unless the commission desires to intervene with questions or comments. The chair will then open a public hearing for those physically present wishing to speak about an item. Those in favor of an item shall be heard first, followed by those opposed to an item. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in favor of an item. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in opposition to an item. And our timekeeper tonight, is that Ms. Painter? Thank you. We'll track the 10-minute time periods and notify the speaker at the 5-minute mark, the 1-minute mark, and verbally call time when it expires. The chair, in their discretion, may extend these time periods. All groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or similar associations desiring to comment are asked to appoint one spokesperson to present their concerns or point of view to the commission on each agenda item. The public has been encouraged to submit their comments in writing via a web-based form located on the City of Wilmington's website. All comments received prior to 3 p.m. today were forwarded unedited to the Planning Commission. All comments received will be delivered to the City Council when the item advances. All comments received will be made available to the public if requested. All votes will be voice votes after proper motions are made and consistency statements read into the record. The chair will state the outcome of the vote and the action. Rezoning requests that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the City of Wilmington City Council. Appeals should be in the form of a letter submitted to the city clerk within 10 days of this hearing. Any items being appealed will tentatively be heard by City Council on August 20th. Commissioners, the draft minutes were in your packet. Are there any comments? The minutes for June 5th.
I make a motion we accept. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just have one comment. On the last page, when we were discussing the Legacy District Amendment, and I'll rely on your all's memory as well too, but I asked the question if the amendment would allow filling in of wetlands, and the answer was no. But I also made reference to, there was one network that ran a story that specifically said this amendment would allow wetlands to be filled in, and that's what I said. And that's just not totally reflected in this. So that's my only comment.
That's something you would want recorded in the minutes, the outlet that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes ma'am, I found it. It said filling in of wetlands and cited articles in the media about density versus impervious surface. And I think I talked about density versus impervious after mentioning that one local network ran a story indicating that wetlands could be filled in and built upon with the passage of that, which was not correct. Am I remembering that
Okay,
correctly?
that does sound familiar.
Thank
Would
you.
you like the actual network that you mentioned it reflected in the minutes? Is that what you're saying? Or just the fact that you said that?
I mean, I said it on tape before it was WWAY. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other?
Since I was not able to join the last hearing, I will abstain from just the motion of the acceptance of the
Okay.
minutes.
I guess we still have a quorum.
Was there an edit in there, John? Are we
sorry?
voting on, are we going to make an amendment? I didn't follow. Are we making an amendment to that text?
I think in the past, when we've pointed things out, Ms. Bradshaw has made the adjustments. Do we have to vote on them?
Okay.
Make the motion with the amendment, right? As opposed to having a separate
Yes.
motion.
The amendment has been noted, and you'll want to vote as amended.
Then I will make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended from Commissioner Lennon from the prior meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The minutes from June 5th are approved. 4-0. All right, our first order of business, our first item is an LDC amendment, and my understanding is that they've requested a continuance. Mr. Henley's here.
Madam Chair, the applicant is requesting that it be continued to the September 5th meeting.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Do we have a motion to continue agenda item 1 to a date certain of September 5th, 2024?
I'll make a motion to continue item number 1 to the September 5th Planning Commission meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. The agenda item number 1 is continued to the September 5th meeting. Our second item is a street closure of a portion of South 23rd Street, a 50-foot wide, unimproved right-of-way located south of Gibson Street, to a 10-foot unnamed alley with a total length of approximately 113 feet, consisting of .128 of an acre of land. Mr. Mahoney is our senior planner, and he will be delivering the staff report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. As mentioned, this request is to close a 50-foot wide, unimproved portion of the South 23rd Street right-of-way located south of Gibson Avenue, shown on the map here. This map shows the site within the context of the surrounding area. These are photos of the site and the existing conditions. These are photos of adjacent properties and land uses along 23rd, south of the site, and along Gibson Street to the east and west of the closure request. The site is currently zoned R5, medium density mixed residential district. If approved, this street closure would add additional lot to the adjacent lots that border the site. They would essentially meet in the middle if this were approved, and those lots would gain that extra square footage. This is the portion of the unimproved right-of-way, which is a gap in the roadway network from South 23rd Street and Gibson Avenue, South 23rd being to the south of the site here, and Gibson Avenue to the north. Currently, Gibson Avenue does not provide a connection to Confederate Drive or the remaining portion of South 23rd Street. There's no connection between the Forest Hills apartment development and Gibson Avenue. I've outlined a vehicular travel path here that someone may have to take while driving a car if you were along Gibson Street trying to access that portion of the Forest Hills apartment development, which would result in you coming back out to Wrightsville Avenue, circling back around, and then going up Confederate Drive and accessing the site. The comprehensive plan encourages an interconnected network of rights-of-way that provide infrastructure services throughout the city. Rights-of-way should not be closed unless there's no existing or future need for them, and the established street patterns would not be significantly interrupted. Currently within this right-of-way, there are drainage improvements. There's water, sewer, gas, electric, and potentially other non-municipal utilities. Adverse impacts were noted from various city entities, including traffic engineering, transportation planning, and city engineering. Staff believes that this request would have an adverse impact on the roadway network. Future connectivity and redevelopment may be inhibited, and circulation within the public roadway network may be impeded by the closure of this right-of-way. Therefore, staff believes the request is not reasonable nor in the public interest and recommends denial. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Does anybody have a question for staff? Commissioner Adams?
Did you say there are believed to be existing utilities in that right-of-way currently?
That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Lennon?
Can you go back to the very first aerial, please?
Tell me when to stop.
There.
Yep.
Is that the actual boundary?
Yes.
So are those buildings in it?
I would take that with a grain of salt. Those are GIS layers overlaid on aerials, so it may not be completely accurate.
So, and then on your diagram where you showed the circuitous route that somebody would have to take, is that, I mean, is this passable now?
No, it is not. It is not.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you.
And we'll invite the applicant up to speak.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, I'm J.C. Hurd. I represent the applicants or the movements of this street closure, Todd Tremaine and Letitia Wisecup. I'm an attorney here in Wilmington, located at Racine Drive. You see the
Mr.
package
Hearn,
that- I'm
could you
sorry.
make sure you speak into the microphone? We seem to be
Yes.
having some technical difficulties.
Can
Thank
hear-
you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is J.C. Hearn. I'm an attorney located at 265 Racine Drive here in Wilmington. I represent Mary Tremaine and Todd Tremaine, owners of 2302 Gibson Avenue, and Letitia Wisecup and Tracy Doerr, owners of 222 Gibson Avenue. I wish I could take credit for all the folks who are here tonight, but I can't. I'm not that exciting, and this is not that exciting, so I appreciate your patience. And my clients are the ones seeking the road closure for the portion of 23rd Street as submitted. As you can see, Forest Hills Apartment backs up to or is adjacent to the historic Carolina Place subdivision. Carolina Place, as many of you know, is one of the oldest subdivisions in Wilmington. It was platted in 1906. Most residents on Gibson Avenue throughout Carolina Place park on both sides of the street. And as you can see from the map, 23rd Street terminates, or the pavement stops, at the rear of Forest Hills Apartments. Forest Hills Apartments has been there since the early 1970s, and to the best of everyone's memory that I've come across, I've had friends live there, I've lived there back in the 70s, there's been a fence around that perimeter. So a question was asked about whether this is passable. It's never been passable as I know it. It's not an open street. The Forest Hills group has changed hands over the years, but they've always maintained a security fence around that property, both for vehicular and pedestrian traffic. You know, I read and understand the staff's report from a planning point of view, from a pure planning point of view. But I believe what's lacking here, we need to talk about the practical consequences of potentially opening up 23rd Street. I would submit to y'all that Carolina Place was not designed nor intended to handle any more traffic than currently exists. I hope everyone's had an opportunity to go out there or has friends that live out there and sees the status of the streets, the parking on both sides of the road. And if you look at Gibson Avenue, if you come out that 23rd Street, if it's ever open, you cannot go right. That's a dead end. You would have to go left. So you would channel all the cars out to the left, not to the right. We submit that any additional traffic upon opening would not only be dangerous, but it would degrade the quiet neighborhood, which has existed on paper for 125 years. We also believe, correspondingly, that Forest Hills would also be overrun if this was open. Everybody from Carolina Place would try to go out that way to cut their time of their travel down significantly. And I know with modern planning standards that a one-way in, one-way out is not what we want to do. But we're dealt with the cards we have. And a few spots around town that we need to look at are places like Hanover Landing, formerly Malibu the Palms. I was there today and looked around a little bit last week, and there are 3 entrances, no turnarounds, and no connectivity. Same thing could be said of Chateau Terrace and the creek at Forest Hills. I can only think of one reason why 23rd Street would be opened, and that would be the redevelopment of the Forest Hill site. And we all know that if they want to redevelop that, they would go for much higher density. And with that, you would have to open up 23rd Street. And I would submit to the group that, to the Planning Commission, that that would be disastrous for Carolina Place. It's not what we want to do. I would like to look at the staff report, talk about a few items on it. On 2.31, there's a list of 4 items that they mentioned that they say the reasons for denial. One is no existing or future need for them. As submitted, Carolina Place has been there for 125 years. Forest Hill's been there for 50 years. No connectivity. The street patterns would not be significantly interrupted. If you open that up, they will be significantly interrupted. The function of nearby streets would be maintained. Not at all. It would seriously disturb the streetscape around Carolina Place, etc. I would just like to reserve a few minutes at the end to address the Planning Commission. Okay?
Okay,
Any
thanks.
questions?
You have any questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you. All right, it's time to open the public hearing for agenda item number 2. And we'll start with those who are here in favor of agenda item 2. And you can just come up to the podium and start with your name and your address. And this is, again, just for agenda item number 2, the road closure.
Hey, good evening. My name is Letitia. I'm one of the residents on Gibson Avenue. Thanks for being here this evening, providing the opportunity to speak with you. The proposed road closing for the portion of 23rd Street that's unimproved is important to several families and people living on Gibson Avenue, and I'm honored to be a spokesperson for our neighborhood. Everyone that I've spoken with in our neighborhood supports the road closing. Gibson Avenue is a dead-end street and has on-street parking on both sides of the road for the entire length of the road. This creates a limited traffic pattern to only one vehicle passing through at a time, as is the case for other roads in our neighborhood. Gibson Avenue and the roads around the neighborhood are not designed to withstand an increase in the amount of vehicle traffic that interconnectivity would bring. There's a common respect between the residents of allowing each other to pass through on this road whenever there is more than one vehicle traveling. The biggest concern everyone had when discussing the road closure topic is wanting to keep our area safe in the way of not increasing the amount of traffic that would come to our road with interconnectivity to the complex next to us. We understand that there has been no discussion about the connection our road to the complex. However, in looking in the future, we all agree that this road closure would help preserve our feeling of safety as we not only travel on Gibson Avenue in our vehicles, but also preserving our feeling of safety as we walk in our neighborhood with our children, with the dogs, for enjoyment and exercise. Residents on other streets in our neighborhood enjoy the peace of mind that they are safe on our road as they walk through as well. There are several families with young children that I see on our street walking to school, learning to ride bikes, playing in the cul-de-sac at the end of our road. If our road was ever connected and made as a thoroughfare, the feeling of safety and neighboring involvement with each other would definitely feel a negative impact. There are people who live on our street, myself included, that work at the hospital, such as nurses, doctors, technologists, supporting staff, who are oftentimes on call for emergencies at the hospital with very short time frame to respond to those emergencies. An increase in traffic could potentially cause more accidents to occur on our street, and this inevitably could impact the response time by the members of the emergency teams living on that road. The increase in traffic could also be on a pedestrian level, and having more access to exit streets could give the potential of increased petty crime on our road. The people who reside on Gibson Avenue are a very close-knit community within a larger community. We all know each other quite well and look after each other every day, including when neighbors are out of town or having family over and being able to recognize when something is out of the norm. The residents on Gibson Avenue are a multi-generational crowd, and although there are usually varied opinions on a single topic with a multi-generational crowd, there is a common opinion and much support of this road closure among us. As the voice representing this group of people, I ask that you strongly consider approving the road closure. If approved, this road closure will keep the residents on Gibson Avenue feeling safe and keeping the thriving activities alive that happen on our street every day. We all love our neighborhood and want to keep it as the shiny gem that we call home for all of our current generations and our future generations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in favor of agenda item 2? Mr. Hearn, there are people here excited about this item, after all. Anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 2? We still have time left, right? 6 minutes.
Yes, I'm Todd Tremaine. I live at 2302 Gibson, and I just wanted to speak about the utilities that are on Gibson Avenue. There is no gas lines, period, at this end of the road. The water and sewer lines that run down Gibson Avenue only provide water and sewer for Gibson Avenue, nowhere else. The only line that goes between the two projects is a storm drain pipe that was laid back when the project was built, back in the 60s or 50s when it was built. That's all. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in favor of agenda item 2? Come to the podium and start with your name and your address. And everyone make sure you've signed in with Ms. Bradshaw before you go.
Hi, my name is John Lovett. I live at 2610 Park Avenue. I'm really just speaking in the spirit of neighborhood preservation and would speak in favor of approving the closure of this right of way. I've actually looked at these aerial views of the community as well that you can look at on either Google Earth or Google Maps. And essentially, de facto, it's closed already. I'm not really sure what the reason of the city is to keep it open, but again, in the spirit of what the folks in Gibson are saying for community and neighborhood preservation, I would propose that the Planning Commission approve closure of this area.
Thank you. Anyone here in favor to speak against agenda item 2? Anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item 2? Anyone here to speak on agenda item 2? The public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, do you have any more questions for the applicant or staff? Commissioner Kofer, and the applicant wanted to address some of the, address this again, I believe, to cover some of the questions in the public hearing.
I just want to address the concerns about some of the utilities and easements in the property. I'm sorry, here we go again. Speak up, please. Yes, sir. So I just want to address some of the questions about the utilities. There are, Todd spoke a little bit about those, but on 2.33 of the staff's recommendation or their analysis, public easements must be reserved to allow for maintenance of public drainage as well as potentially future upgrades if necessary. 2, existing asphalt must be removed. The existing drainage system must be reconfigured. The curb lines must be restored. And if a driveway is constructed, a driveway entrance consistent with current city standards must be constructed. All those are doable according to city staff. We could, involved in your order, if you do propose to close it, we could make amendments to that to make sure that we take those into consideration. Because there are easements, certain easements in that right of way. Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Mr. Hearn. Any questions for the applicant?
Okay.
Yes,
Commissioner
Madam Chair,
Kofer?
thank you. Mr. Hearn, I do have a few questions. J.C. Hey. What transpired to bring this about? Did the city come out and start looking at approving? Did the adjacent property owners, are they looking to, did they
Yeah,
promote
It
this?
started a long time ago, and I might have Mr. Tremaine fill us in, but years ago, he lives at 2302 Gibson, I believe. He had some health issues in his family, and they could not get to the front of the house. So they used this side as a driveway to get to the back, easy access to the house. He has an elderly mother-in-law living there, and that's the way they get there. And over time, it just, he was using that, and he kept asking the city about it, if the city would ever consider closing it or see what they would do, give them ease or whatever, and they would never really address it with him. And then we talked up and down the neighborhood about it and looked at the possible redevelopment of that, and it sort of mushroomed into asking us to close the property. So we'd split it in half. It would not produce a buildable lot for anyone in particular, but I guess Ms. Wisecup and Ms. 222 would get half of it, 2308 would get the other half of it. So that's how it started.
Fair enough. And so would your clients that you're representing, I mean, would they have intentions of doing a recombo of this parcel to develop it?
No, sir. There's not that I've been told about. They've not hired me to do that. I don't see how they would do that. Such a small parcel, they already have homes. I don't think they could, I guess theoretically, you could deed that to one of the parties. They could potentially redevelop. I've not looked at the zoning code as to that particular piece of property. Also want to point out on the back of this property, on one of the surveys that was shown, there's a 10-foot alley that shows up. Can't find it on the plat map, but the surveyors keep finding it, and that's not part of this closure. But that's another issue that if 23rd Street were ever open, it would have to be dealt with. But, so we purposely did not include that. As far as redevelopment, I'm not aware of any plans.
And your understanding is that's a public alley? That 10-foot alley is a public alley? Right, thank you.
Yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Lennon?
Mr. Mahoney told us that there were utilities there. Now we hear there's storm drainage there. Is there anything other than storm drainage?
That would be a city question. I'm not aware of anything other than that.
But if I understood you correctly, your clients would be willing to make sure that the city has an easement for the maintenance of stormwater?
That's right, and that would go to the redevelopment of it. I think if the easement's somewhere, anywhere near the center of that property, so
You wouldn't be able to
that's right.
do anything to it. But back to my question, your clients would be willing to agree to a city easement for stormwater?
I would like to see the easement itself, but in concept, we're not opposed to that. I'd like to see the document. We've constructed, if you've been by there, there's a carport, if you will, sort of a porticulture. I don't know if that would be able to remain with that. I have to see the easement.
Okay. I guess the rest of my questions are for staff
Okay.
on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
For the applicant?
No,
staff?
for the staff,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Mahoney, would you come back up? I also want to address the utilities because I'm surprised they wouldn't have moved the water lines from Gibson down to 23rd at least. So do you know which utilities are in that?
It's my understanding, in correspondence with Cape Fear Public Utility Authority, that there's a manhole located near this closure. And in conversations with engineering, there is drainage as well within the right-of-way. There is a drainage feature directly within that right-of-way that would be impacted.
One that goes along Gibson Avenue or through?
Into the portion of 23rd Street that is for discussion tonight.
Okay. That would been helpful to have on the map to know where it is. Commissioner Lennon?
I'm really confused now, and just me personally, I hate these things, and I usually don't like them to happen, but this one seems to make sense, but I'm also a little bit unsettled by the fact that we don't know exactly what's there and what's not there. So if there's, I mean, I think that's sort of important. But to Commissioner Adams' comment, I mean, they have to provide the easement for the stormwater, but I guess I just would like to know what is there and what easements would have to be provided.
There's a drainage pipe, I believe, that goes directly down into the middle of this portion of the right-of-way that is being proposed to be closed. I'm sorry, I don't have a diagram for you, but that's the best way I can describe it.
Commissioner Pollak?
Yeah, Patrick, and this may be, I don't know if you have anybody here from traffic or traffic engineering or whatever, we do. I noticed, and it's on, I guess it would be 4.3.1, and there's the table on the next page, and it says, traffic engineering and adverse effect, engineering and adverse effect, then I come down to transportation planning, adverse effect, and then planning, adverse effect. I read through this, but I guess, am I correct to assume that the city's position in terms of the adverse effect is looking forward as a potential, as opposed to right now, currently in the moment?
That's correct. And as was mentioned by the applicant, the future redevelopment potential in this area that may happen, and having another means of ingress and egress to the Forest Hills apartments. Again, it's right now essentially one way in, one way out to Colonial from those apartments. So having this right away available is very important for future connectivity.
So let me hypothesize a minute. So if the commission were to vote to close the parcel that we're talking about here, and then at some later date, given all the, you know, the economic pressures on housing and, you know, the need for, et cetera, would the city in effect have foregone its rights to this piece of property forever? Could the city come back under the guise of eminent domain and say, no, we need to open this up?
That's difficult for me to hypothesize on.
Sean, that's probably more to you.
Yeah, that would be difficult. I mean, the city could potentially condemn it in the future if we closed it now, if there was a future need, but there'd likely be improvements in that area, and it'd be an expensive proposition for the city to look at doing that at that point.
So again, to summarize, the city's position is the objection to it is looking at the future, potential future development in that area.
Right.
That's the
And future
connection.
connectivity, yes.
Okay, that's what I had. Thank you.
Commissioner Cofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One more. Pat, I asked the applicant's legal advisor, but does the city have any intention to improve this in real time?
Not that I'm aware of at this moment.
This is not on the city's radar?
Not that I'm aware of at this
Okay,
moment. No.
so this was applicant-driven, 100%? Okay, thank you, sir.
Commissioner Adams?
There look to be a couple of fences that are built and in place, maybe one by 222 Gibson and maybe one by the multifamily. Are those considered non-conforming or illegal constructions in a public right-of-way as they currently exist today?
And technically, they would be potentially zoning violations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners. So keep in mind, we're not voting on taking down the fence and improving the road. We're voting on giving up control of that piece of property into private hands. So it's not if we vote no, if we follow the staff's recommendation and vote deny, it's not going to open up the road next week, tomorrow. Sounds like maybe never. I don't feel good about giving up that control over that lot, not knowing what will happen in the future. I mean, it's been there for 125 years, I get it, and just some cars parked on it, and maybe it'll be like that for another 125 years, but I'm not going to make those decisions for the future planning commissions and city councils. I think that we need to hold on to this. Commissioner Cofer?
I agree with those sentiments. You know, some of our job is to look 50 years into the future when we're as a city planning, and who knows what'll happen in 50 years. But to take and strip that piece of property from the public domain and make it private property, I don't see any compelling reason that merits that. The city, as testified here, has no intention to improve it, to make it accessible. I'll step out on a limb and say that the property owners may have some type of adverse possession claim that they could actually do a land grab. But there are times when, based on city annexation into the county, where certain alleys need to be abandoned. It makes sense. This on paper, to me, doesn't make sense, and it's certainly not getting any approval from any of our department heads or the staff. I mean, the color wheel is pretty much red, so I would be a no on this one.
Commissioner Adams? No, he said he didn't.
I echo my fellow commissioners so far. I mean, I don't think you can use hypothetical futures as a way to preclude the flexibility of city infrastructure, so this is not going to be one that I can support. I just also think it sets a bad precedent of basically, like Commissioner Cofer said, taking away a public piece of land and removing it from the ability for the city to grow and evolve over time.
All right, what's the will of the commission? I'm going to make a motion. Commissioner Lennon?
I really hate these things. And just for anybody who's listening, what I hate most about them is that when we do these, the adjacent property owners get the land for free and the city gets no economic benefit. That's a state law, as Sean has told us many times. I'm struggling on this one, which may surprise all of you, but that's a 50-foot area. So even if the apartments were redeveloped, I don't know how much of an ingress-egress that could be, given how narrow it is. And so I honestly don't know which way I'm going to go yet. Because this one to me is different. I think you look at that neighborhood on Gibson, and ironically, this reminds me a lot of a project that never came to bear that would have put a lot of traffic out into a neighborhood. And that could be a problem. We'll find out together.
All right. Are we ready to make a motion?
I'll take a
Cofer?
shot. Let's see, where are we? Okay, I move to reject agenda item number 2, the request portion of South 23rd Street right-of-way closure. This request is not consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The proposal hinders future connectivity and circulation within the public road network, would be impeded by the closure of this portion of the right-of-way. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends rejection of this request.
Thank you, Mr. Cofer. Mr. Cofer has recommended denial of agenda item number 2. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second with Commissioner Adams. Seconds left to make up your mind. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
And to confirm, Mr. Attorney, we just need a simple majority up here.
That's correct.
All right,
Four-
motion passes.
4 to 1.
Motion passes 4 to 1. Thank you for your counting skills. I appreciate that. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. Agenda item number 3 is a conditional district rezoning of property containing 2.39 acres located at 1320 Independence Boulevard from R15 moderate density single dwelling district to ONI-CD office and institutional conditional district for commercial district mixed use. And Ms. France is here with our staff report.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The site is located at the intersection of Oleander Drive and Independence Boulevard, contains approximately 2.39 acres, and is currently vacant. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request, as well as photos of the subject property. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. And these are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. Commercial uses are located to the south and east, with single-family residential located to the north and west. Site is currently zoned R15, Moderate Density Single Dwelling District, and is bordered by RB, Regional Business to the southeast and east, ONI-CD Office and Institutional Conditional District to the south, and R15 to the north and west. The applicant proposes to rezone the subject site to ONI-CD for a CDMU development. The project would consist of 16 three-bedroom townhome units and a four-story, 32,900 square foot mixed-use building, which includes 24 one-bedroom units and 2,270 square feet of commercial space. Additionally, the project would provide driveway access from Independence Boulevard and require improvement of the rear alley. In front of you are conceptual elevations of the proposed townhomes and mixed-use building. The site is located within an urban mixed-use center and a transit-oriented mixed-use center along a high-capacity transit route, a major corridor and regional parkway, community parkway and loop road, and an existing greenway on the comprehensive plan's growth strategies map. The proposal includes additional housing units along two major corridors while serving as a transition from higher intensity uses and the existing neighborhood to the west. Site plan proposes enhanced pedestrian connection to the Cross City Trail, dedication of land to improve an alley as an access point, and proposes missing middle housing near commercial services. Additionally, the site is within walking distance of 3 grocery stores, a park, and multiple commercial services, and is along a multi-use path and transit line. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable in the public interest. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions in the case summary listed be applied. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant and his agent are here as well.
Commissioner Pollack?
Miranda, can we just set a baseline for this discussion tonight? And it's this. Sure. They're currently at R15, want to go to another zone. Is the jump from R15 to the requested zone purely driven by the retail component, the commercial component? Is that the only reason we're talking about this?
For the CDMU, I think he's
For the
what he's talking
CDMU,
about.
it provides additional housing units along with a
the
commercial component.
Okay, so if the commercial component was not there, would we be looking at potentially another zoning, another?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you for now.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. France, I think I do here. Hang on a second. Let me catch up. Will you go back to the site plan for just a second? Yep. Our packet is really small. I can't hear and barely see. But so is the entire width of the proposed alley improvements at its intersection to Oleander 25? Okay.
That's correct.
For some reason, it looked a little narrower on my plan. And do we have any elevations of the western side of the building that would be adjacent to the residential?
I'm not sure if the applicant has any additional elevations, but
Okay.
what was in the presentation is what we were supplied with.
Understood, okay. Does the city have any type of standard or metric we use for appropriate buffers? And the applicant may get into the science of a buffer, but just asking you that question.
Sure. This development requires a Class B transitional buffer, which I believe I've included somewhere in here. I believe that they have proposed option 1 against R15 zoning.
This would apply to both I guess, linear going down Independence and then both sides? Yeah,
Only adjacent to the R15 zoning.
only adjacent to R15?
That's correct.
Do you have a landscaping plan in your slides?
I do not in my slides, the applicant may.
Okay. And I believe the last agenda topic might have mentioned is MPO here tonight to address any questions?
We don't have anyone from MPO, but we do have someone from traffic engineering.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ferns.
Commissioner Adams?
Can you briefly, just so we have a point of reference, describe what allowable height and/or setbacks are in the by right R15 versus the proposed O&I CD?
Sure. Right here, R15 allows for 35 feet in height. Setbacks are listed in front of you, 20 feet from the front, 25 from the rear, 10 on an interior side, and 15 on a street side. O&I allows for 45 feet by right, and then setbacks in this case are actually per a frontage standard on Oleander Drive, which I have included in this slide. You're welcome.
Anything else for staff? Commissioner Lennon?
Can you go back to the site plan?
Sure.
Please.
Just give me one moment.
No, I'm sure the applicant will speak more to this, but what's the stormwater treatment for this site currently?
They're proposing a stormwater wetland along Independence Boulevard.
How's it being treated now?
It's not.
What about the neighborhood to the west? How is that stormwater treated?
I don't believe it is either.
Okay. On the 5th page of the report in 2.3.2, you refer to the word transition is used a lot. Can you speak to how staff looks at that, and is this a transition?
Sure. Obviously, to the west, there's the existing single-family residential lower-density lots. Across the street is more intense, higher commercial uses. This itself is the transition of proposing mixed use along with different housing types. So going from single-family residential to the higher intensity across the street, we would consider this to be a transition.
And I noticed that was reflected in the report with all the blue arrows. Do you have a aerial map of the intersection?
Yes.
Can you go out, can you go out a little bit more? Do you have one that's more regional?
I can try. There.
My compatriot has a really good one. Okay, so that's Hanover Center. On the southwest side, are those, what's that zoned there?
R15 mostly, but there's O&I CD and MD17 along Oleander.
Okay, so that would encompass the Oleander apartments there and the stuff on Mayfair?
Yes.
Okay, and then on the southeast corner, of course, you have the mall. And then last question, if you go back to your circle map. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of comments about these circles. Why was it drawn to incorporate the whole intersection in part of both the north and south parcels on the west side?
That I would defer to Mr. Chambers.
And are these circles parcel specific?
They're not.
What does that mean?
I would also defer to Mr. Chambers.
Closer to the mic.
Commissioner Lennon, these lines are drawn to be, they're not supposed to be cut and dry, they're not parcel specific. There's no direct boundary, it's just a guidance of what type of growth pattern should be encouraged in the area.
Okay. But it is curious that it crossed the intersection when they drew it.
Again, it's not parcel specific, so it was drawn generally around the commercial center that's located there today.
On 3 of the 4 corners.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Adams.
The staff report says that a TIA was not required. Can you just, again, for educational purposes, talk about what level of trip generation requires a TIA and where this project falls relative to that?
Sure. I believe it's 100 AM, PM, 1,000 daily. That triggers a TIA, and this project proposes, one moment.
Good memory, I think you're right.
21 AM, 25 PM, and 301 average weekday.
So roughly a quarter of what would trigger an actual TIA.
That is correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Pollock.
Miranda, back, let's start with, and we always ask this question when you go through the arrows analysis and whatever, and there's always that phrase, that describes the neighborhood and from the city's perspective, can you describe the neighborhood? Is it a historic neighborhood? Is it how would you describe the neighborhood that this parcel of land is part of?
Sure. My understanding is that this neighborhood is not listed in the National Register or local landmark. And additionally, I don't believe this parcel was ever incorporated within the neighborhood. I can't 100% speak to that. So I don't necessarily know if it's historic just based on time and not designation.
The second question I have then is in the area of transition, okay? Where does the city view the point of transition? Is it the alley, and then this parcel of land is like part of, like to Independence and across, or is the transition, where's the point of transition? I'm trying to determine in my mind from where to where. What are we transitioning from and transitioning to?
Well, since this project is just proposed on this property, that's what we're looking at. So we're considering what they're proposing to be the transition itself. I don't think there's a distinct set
No,
space.
and I'm sure there's not. I was trying to
Yeah.
understand from the logic as the staff evaluated, what was the thinking? Because I know it's not just you looking at it personally. I know you as a team look at it. So that's why I was just trying to understand what the thinking was.
It's the proposal itself.
Yeah. The other question I have is, and it's more kind of along the line of Commissioner Adams, when I look at the traffic piece, and it's, and I always, this has always been my frustration here. It talks about, 300 is the number, and so it's, my interpretation is always it's from 0 to 300, and 300 coming in, coming out onto a rather busy Independence Boulevard. So
We're going to be here. We're going to be here a really long time if that happens over and over. So.
And so I'm just trying to understand, it just appears that we're potentially, even though the threshold is what, 1,000, I think you said earlier, that was any consideration given to the fact that this is Independence Boulevard, and if this is the only in-out on Independence, any thoughts, or was it just the 1,000 minimum?
I think staff considered the traffic impact. We also looked at the proximity to services, the transit line, the crosswalks to commercial services, and the cross-city trail as alternative means of transportation that could be utilized to access the site as well.
I'm not sure what you just said, Brian.
So
but
the vehicle trips is one thing we look at, and that's why we include that in the report, but we also look at what other amenities are around the site and what other forms of transportation are available to the site. There's a transit line, there's crosswalks to get to the commercial services in the area, and there's a cross-city trail that traverses the site.
Okay, we may have to come back to that, but okay. And finally, from the city's perspective, the alley, and I see what the applicant has proposed. improving a piece of the alley, but not 100% of the alley. And I realize that if the applicant commits to improving a piece of the alley, the only thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing that the applicant would be accountable for is if he commits to the piece of the property that he is looking to develop. So it's bound by that, correct? So if you come off of Oleander, you go up come off of Oleander, you go up the alley. And I'll say this for the applicant. I'll say this for the
I
applicant.
mean, as far as adding that as a condition?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of his proposal, but let's
To go all the
let's
way.
come back to, yes, actually, let's come back later. That's all I've got for now. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you, Ms. France. Oh, wait. Commissioner Lennon.
What is Independence rated at, traffic-wise?
I'm not sure.
It's a C.
C.
What is Oleander rated at? It's an A.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, and I apologize, somewhere on one of these maps, I saw key crossing improvements noted. Is that new crosswalks? Is that?
It's either new crosswalks or improved crosswalks.
Okay. And then the other thing is there was a lot of questions about the break in the Cross-City Trail with a driveway entrance. Are there other areas in the city where the cross-country trail has, or cross-county trail has driveways across it?
Yes.
So like Eastwood Road is one that comes to my mind. How many,
I couldn't tell you that.
and that would be marked, I'm assuming, the intersection?
Yes.
Okay. And then last question, I promise. The plan speaks to height and proximity to major thoroughfares. So for the four-story building, it's exactly where our land development code and our comprehensive plan said it should go. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Adams.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Is Independence Boulevard a DOT road or is that city only?
It's DOT.
So it's DOT, okay. And then what is the minimum lot size for R15 compliant lots?
15,000 square feet.
So how many lots would that equal on a 2.39 acre lot?
Roughly 8 lots.
8, okay, thank you.
All right, I think you can sit down now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. France. And the applicant is here to speak?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Sam Frank. I represent the applicant. I do have a presentation. I'm going to wait just for a moment for that to pop up, if that's all right. So the staff did a fantastic job analyzing this case relative to the comprehensive plan and our future land use strategies. I haven't seen a circle that blue since I started doing this work. I'm not going to spend a lot of time focused on that. This site is in a fantastic location, which I hope I'm about to show you very shortly.
Apologize for the delay.
No problem. While I'm waiting on that, perhaps I could respond. Commissioner Pollack, you asked about why include commercial in this at all, and what would we rezone it to if we did not include that commercial component. The plan that's been proposed to you today, the redevelopment that's proposed to you today, is the result of 9 to 10 months worth of dialogue with staff and community engagement. One of the things that we derive from our discussions with staff is that a mix of uses would be more desirable for the city and more consistent with the comprehensive plan than a purely residential proposal. So the incorporation of a commercial component and ultimately the zoning district that is contemplated here, the O&I with the CDMU, was driven by a suggestion from staff that we were interested to accommodate. That's what led us to that specific designation and the inclusion of some of commercial use. All right, so this site is located in a neighborhood centered on the intersection of Oleander and Independence. Certainly an interesting neighborhood, wide variety of uses. You have significant and intense commercial, retail, and related uses on one side of that intersection. You have single-family residential uses to the northwest and also to the southwest beyond the more intense commercial uses. Creates a tremendous opportunity. We need houses. This is no shock to any of you, but the city is in desperate need of more housing. Based on the New Hanover County study performed in 2020.
The public hearing hasn't started yet, so please be respectful to the folks at the podium.
Thank you, ma'am. Based on the county's 2020 study that was updated in 2022, with regard to for sale homes, we need to the tune of over 16,000 houses. What we specifically need is to improve the diversity of houses and address the missing middle. The location where we need those houses, ideally, is in commercial-focused areas where we have existing, well-established infrastructure. This proposal aims to deliver exactly that. As you've identified, this is at the intersection of two significant NCDOT-maintained roads that are both operating at an excellent level of service. The delivery of a diversity of housing in this location will provide an opportunity for more people to live closer to commercial amenities in the city. It's just that simple. The site has direct access to a wave transit stop and the Cross City Trail. And although the site supports, by our count, a subdivision to develop 7 single-family homes with accessory dwelling units, the proposal here presents a much more desirable diversity of housing options. It includes dedication of 10 feet of land to improve a public right-of-way, addition of stormwater controls, the addition of a bicycle parking and network of sidewalks to encourage pedestrian and bike transportation, and a couple of EV parking spaces to boot. This elevation shows you a rendered depiction of that proposed development with several of the canopy trees preserved along the edge of it. Here's a couple more, just to give you an idea. These are white boxes. They are not intended to depict architectural style, just to give you an idea of the massing and nature of the development within the existing canopy of trees, exactly the way we proposed to do it. Image on the left is looking south across Independence. Image on the north is, at the bottom, is looking north across Oleander and down the alley. What I'd like to talk about today primarily is the comparison to what is permitted by right development in the R15 today versus what we've proposed. There's often a misconception when you look at a vacant piece of land that you're comparing whether or not something should be allowed to be built on that vacant piece of land. It's not the case at all. Rezoning is about adapting the code that sets the fundamental parameters for use and development on land. In this case, the by right development of this property would support subdivision into 7 lots, single-family homes, and accessory dwelling units on each of them. They would include driveway curb cuts out to Independence in multiple numbers, if not on every lot, and curb cuts on the alley. Here's an elevation similar in style to the one that I showed you a moment ago that gives you a good idea of what by right R15 development with traditional homes and ADUs would look like at that site. R15 development, single-family lots, requires no tree save whatsoever. Again, this gives you an idea of what the by right development would look like from, again, no architectural style intended, just to give you an idea of the massing location of the structures and the curb cuts along the road.
I'm not going to be respectful about this bullshit. I'm walking out.
Okay.
That is such crap.
So, Madam Chair, with regard to etiquette, my authority is limited to my conduct alone, and therefore the best I can do is present myself in an appropriate manner to you. I can't respond to comments or questions from citizens, but I absolutely can respond to questions from any of you. So if at anywhere along the way you have questions or concerns about what I'm presenting and would like to ask those of me, I welcome the opportunity to respond to them.
Madam Chair, he's reached 5 minutes if you'd like to make a decision on whether to provide more time.
Okay, how much more time do you think you would need?
Yeah, we got a late start with the presentation.
You
being
didn't start
uploaded
until
and-
he started the presentation? Okay.
Yeah, with your consent.
Well, if you need a few more minutes, I'll make sure I give them a few more minutes too, so.
Understood completely. I'd be grateful for an additional 5 minutes if that would be all right with you.
Granted.
Thank you. All right, here's the proposed development. As you can see, part of the conditional approval will require saving of trees. It requires a single point of ingress and egress from each of the alley and Independence Boulevard. Incorporates stormwater management that is engineered and designed to accommodate the site. All features that would not be included in a by right development. Just to give you a general idea of the massing, again, with no intent to identify specific architectural style here, this shows you a cross-section about halfway up the proposed development. This is one of the townhouse buildings being shown. The box on the left of the alley is an existing structure, existing home. As you can see, the existing alley here is widened from 15 feet to 25 feet, consisting with the approval contemplated here. As you can also see here, the canopy of trees is substantially taller than the structures that are proposed.
And to confirm, that's the canopy that you're leaving there that's there now, right? It's not, we have to wait 20 years for it to grow up that high?
Absolutely. No, ma'am. I'm referring to the height of the trees that exist on the property today that would have to be saved and preserved in connection with a conditional rezoning and would not have to be saved or preserved if the land were left zoned as it is today. Here's a comparison of that similar image, the top being what's permitted by right under R15 development today, the bottom being the proposed development. Significant to note that the setback for an ADU is only 5 feet off of the rear property line. So that accessory dwelling structure at the back is 5 feet off the property line, which is the alley. Also note that in the process of widening the alley and giving up 10 feet of land, we're also moving the structures that much further away from the existing structures on the west side of the alley. The result is, under the proposed rezoning, development of vertical structures would be substantially further away from existing structures on the west side, not to mention the tree protection that I previously alluded to. Let's talk about height. A lot of conversation about height, what's consistent with the existing neighborhood and the like. This, I hope you can read the numbers on the far right there. Those are the actual heights, 35, 40, and 45 feet. The image on the right side of the screen shows you the height that's permitted today in R15. Height limit is 35 feet. It's measured to the middle of the roof pitch from the average natural grade at the site of the building. So a maxed out building in the R15 with a typical roof pitch for a colonial style home would sit with a peak about 42 feet above grade. What we've proposed here is 3-story townhomes that will be somewhere between 40 to 45 feet at their peak, and a proposed mixed-use structure with a flat roof that will be 45 feet or less at its peak. Also interesting to note that the zoning directly across Independence in the neighborhood allows a height of up to 96 feet. And so with regard to height, I think we're demonstrating plainly that, well, there's some subtle distinction here. It is awfully subtle. The height that's permitted today, the height that's permitted in the general area of the neighborhood today, and the height that's been proposed are all consistent with one another. Talk briefly about trees. I'll talk about it one more time. The image on the bottom right shows you trees not only that will be saved, those are the dark green circles, but also trees that will be incorporated into the plan. Those are the light green circles. The image on the left side of the screen shows you the trees that would have to be saved pursuant to the law today that applies to these lots, which of course is none. Oh, sorry. I wanted to talk briefly about ingress and egress there too. Yeah. Stormwater management. The stormwater that's been proposed here is a stormwater engineered wetland. It's pretty cool. It's dry most of the time. It incorporates land absorption when it needs to, but it appears basically as an indented grassy meadow at other times. I have images of that. If you want to see them later, please ask. The driveways here, as we've proposed it, one point of ingress and egress off Independence, deliberately located as far from the intersection as possible. One point of ingress and egress off of the alley to consolidate the traffic going in and out of the development. That length of the property, which I think is just over 600 feet, is also the length of the alley, Commissioner Pollack, that would be improved. That's what we can control. We can dedicate land that we own. We can't dedicate land that we don't. Here's the landscape plan in a little bit bigger image, gives you an idea of, again, the trees that would be saved in connection with this rezoning and also the new trees that the developer has committed to plant. 9 to 10 months worth of process, talk, conversation to make this a better plan. We really appreciate all of the input we received from staff along the way. Some of the things that changed from the initial proposal to what's presented to you today are highlighted here. We reduced the density of homes on site by 12%, went from 46 down to 40 homes. Reduced the footprint of the mixed-use building and increased its height in response to good comments from staff that enables us to save more trees and incorporate a lesser amount of impervious surface.
Is this your last slide? That was your timer.
Understood.
Okay.
Let me, if you'll bear with me and give me 30 seconds, I will close. All right. As previously discussed, the proposed mixed-use development is absolutely consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. This development will provide much-needed and organically more affordable housing options in an excellent location. While everyone is certainly entitled to their opinion, it's objectively clear here that the proposed rezoning will lead to a far more beneficial development of this land to the citizens of Wilmington than the development of the land under the current zoning. For all of these reasons, we respectfully request that you recommend approval of the zoning. With your consent, I would be grateful for the opportunity to address you again after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Any questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Adams?
I have a couple. Is the secondary access for what I'm going to call the mixed use or commercial parking lot off the alley required as a TRC thing for fire access, or is that purely being provided as a convenience way to get in and out of that parking?
We need 2 points of access to accommodate the technical code. And with the cooperation of staff and insight from them, we decided to incorporate one of those points of access on the alley and one of those points on Independence.
My second question, what is the range in square footage of footprint for your townhouse units from largest to smallest?
Bear with me, I'm going to turn around and ask my client so I don't get your answer wrong.
Footprint.
Let me introduce Dave Spatrino, who's an owner of the applicant entity, to answer your question, Commissioner Adams.
So it looks like 3,200 for the largest and 1,600 for a double, roughly.
So the unit sizes are 16 wide and 20 wide. The depths are 42, so 20 by 42 or 16 by 44.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Pollock?
Topic is transition.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and if I look at the elevations, and what I'm trying to get, I mean, let me preface, I'm all for development. Lord knows we need it, okay? But there's a way that our job is to figure out whether in the proposal here, does this fit, does it not? So, you know, I'm going to quote one of my peers, form matters. Maybe for a different reason tonight, I don't know. But I'm really struggling with, you know, transition. Because, I mean, you know, I don't live in that neighborhood, but I don't live far from that neighborhood, all right? So when I drive around that neighborhood and I see there's a lot of historic homes, a lot of homes got plaques on them, all right? People have invested a lot of time there. So you've got a plot of land here that all of a sudden sits on a corner. It's been there, it's been undeveloped. What are we transitioning from an historic neighborhood? Or is I'll ask the same question I asked earlier, is the point of transition the alley and then everything, you know, in the new proposal on towards the shopping center? Is that all kind of considered a neighborhood? I mean, help me understand what you would define as the integrity of the neighborhood.
Yes, sir. You asked multiple questions. Let me
I
answer
did.
answer them in turn. First, I'll respond to your last question. What is the neighborhood? From a planning perspective, from a comprehensive plan perspective, there's no question that the neighborhood is the intersection outward. That is, the intersection of Independence Boulevard and Oleander is the center of that neighborhood. That's a pretty eclectic neighborhood. It includes some amazing diversity of uses. If you have a diversity of uses, you have to have a transition somewhere between those uses. And the question is that transition going to be abrupt or gradual, right? And so with regard to your second question, where is the point of transition? For my part, I don't think of transition as being a point. I think about it as a gradient. That is, you see a greater intensity of uses sliding into a lower intensity of uses on a slope, as opposed to, that's the desirable solution anyway, as opposed to having an abrupt change from a very tall commercial building adjacent to a very low-density residential neighborhood. In this case, this transitionary area, or this transition area, is very effective in that it creates an opportunity for a slight increase in intensity of use relative to the residential use to the west of it, adjacent to a much more significant increase in intensity of use across Independence Boulevard and south of Oleander. The image on the screen is the cross-section that we showed earlier. And as you can see, the design of the townhomes, especially with the canopy of trees preserved, is a really comfortable transition. You go from a lower density residential use that's been there for a greater period of time to a slightly higher density residential use to a highway to a higher density of commercial use on the other side with the cross-city trail in between. It really provides a fantastic opportunity to transition that use. Whereas if you were to simply build new single-family homes like the image on the top of your screen, you don't get the benefit of that transition. You just get newer similar homes next to older similar homes without any transition from the commercial on the east side of Independence flowing into it.
Other question I have is on the, if you go back to your rendering where you show the as, by right, where you
Yes,
have
sir.
the 7 homes.
Just take me a second to get
Sure,
there.
no, go ahead.
You looking for the rendering or the site plan?
Go back to the site plan, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Keep going back. There you
There we
go. By right, I get what you're saying, I understand what you're saying. Could you not have easily drawn this by right to show that the access to these 7 homes, instead of coming on to Independence, could go in and out of the alley? Would that have even been
So there is an access to the alley. We have we're showing the ADUs with access points to the alley in this image. It's tight because there's only 5 feet there. It's hard to see through the line. But let me be clear. What I'm showing here is what could be built pursuant to the existing law. I'm not proposing an alternative style of buildings to construct. I'm demonstrating to you that the law today permits what's on the screen here. While in the same token, what we are proposing is a very conditional, very controlled type of development under a conditional rezoning. And so while we're showing you on the proposed exactly what we propose to develop, what we're showing you on the permitted by right is intended to demonstrate what is permitted by the parameters available at the law today.
And I guess really the thrust of my question is, while I understand exactly what you're showing here,
Yeah.
you could just as easily have shown the access that you show in Independence could be toward the back to the alley.
I don't know how each of those individual home builders would choose to handle it. I recognize that they would have a choice. I recognize that they would have a choice to set access on Independence and the alley, or one or the other.
Okay.
I also recognize that the law would contemplate permission of either or both, and so that's what we've depicted here.
Okay? Thanks,
Well, and that's
Lee.
our charge up here, is to look at the most intense use of what's there and look at the property, the proposal in front of us. So this is an appropriate slide for showing the most intense use, which may or may not be what would be developed if our 15 remain. Do we have a comment or a question, Commissioner Adams?
Sam, you talked about this
Done yet, but-
stormwater.
No, it's okay. Well, I'll come back.
Here, go ahead, Jack. You talked about the stormwater management approach as an ephemeral, non-continuously wet feature.
Yes.
I didn't know if you had any precedent images in this slide of what that would look like on a regular basis, or if you didn't, what is here in town that would be a similar thing that people might have an awareness of?
Yes, sir. bear with me, I got to get deep into my rebuttal slides, but I think we've got a couple slides to depict examples of engineered wetland stormwater facilities. This is one in the Raintree neighborhood. And this is another here at Jellwade Park. And give you an idea of what I was trying to verbalize earlier, but certainly the image is more valuable than my description.
My apologies, my public apologies.
That's
Commissioner
all right.
Pollak, please continue.
I will just take 15 minutes longer. No, I'm just kidding. I want to go to the I'm just going down my list real quick. Yeah, I'd like you again to comment on the lack of a traffic study, the 301 trips in and out, onto a rather busy street.
Sure.
Okay. And I realize falls under the 1,000 threshold, but I'd like you to comment on why in your approach to this, did you just, I'm under 300, or I'm under 1,000, so I'm good, or share with us your thoughts.
Absolutely. So when traffic engineers evaluate traffic impact for the sake of determining whether or not there needs to be a TIA, well, really, when traffic engineers evaluate traffic impact for any purpose, they look at the peak hour trips. And the threshold for the requirement for a TIA is a number of 100 peak hour trips, either in the AM peak hour or the PM peak hour. And the reason for that is if you just look at 300 trips a day, it's misleading because the cars don't all leave at the same time, and they also definitely don't leave in a dispersed fashion over the course of the day. So what you want to look at is when is it most intense, and that's what they mean by peak. In this case, the traffic impact is with the by right development, 7 single-family homes versus what we've proposed here. At the peak hour, the increase, I think, is something to the tune of 1 additional car per every 5 minutes during the peak hour. So my first response to your question is the traffic impact of what we're proposing is negligible compared to what's permitted by right. More importantly, though, this proposal is far more responsible with regard to how traffic is managed than what would be permitted to be developed by right today. This incorporates a single point of ingress and egress off of, a single and common point of ingress and egress off of Independence, and a single point of ingress and egress off of the alley, not to mention the improvements to the alley, all of which makes the traffic flow to and from this piece of property more organized, intentional, and deliberate than it would be if these were simply developed as R15 lots. The roads, we don't have a lot of roads in Wilmington that are operating at a level of A service. We don't have a lot of roads in Wilmington that are operating at a level of C service. The capacity on Oleander and Independence is substantial compared to the number of cars that are on it. Now, I get frustrated sitting at a traffic light just like everybody else does. I get that. I understand completely. But objectively, we have to look at these are major thoroughfares maintained by the state that are operating at an excellent level of service, and we've proposed a solution that delivers whatever additional new traffic goes to those thoroughfares in a more intentional, designed, and appropriate manner than the haphazard approach that R15 development would provide.
Okay, for now. You've explained where you're at. Thank you.
Oh, and forgive me if I didn't answer your question.
We're fine.
Okay.
Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Frank, just a few, and we'll probably have more after the public hearing, but we're on the screen that mentions reduced, second bullet from the top left, reduced footprint and increased height of the mixed-use structure to increase tree preservation. In the event that you do not focus on, your client did not focus on tree preservation, could that building be 3-story?
With the combination of the incorporation of a commercial use and following staff's lead to see a preference for a smaller footprint, no, not realistically. If we were to eliminate both of those things, that is, if we were to impact more trees and also eliminate the commercial use, I don't think so, but maybe is the answer to your question.
Okay. Second question. In our packet, It appears that we have 3 elevations of the townhomes.
Yeah, I can get to those if you'll bear with me a second.
One has a dormer in the roof system, I believe.
I think they're near the end, sorry, bear with me. Yeah. There we go.
Okay. Hang on now. There's 4, I have 3. Just for clarity purposes, because my understanding is that the proposal will run with the land, not just with the applicant, should something happen to them or they sell the project. So what we see here are 4 different renderings of different elevations. Is that what will be built?
So these are conceptual renderings designed to demonstrate general style and massing. This is not an architectural commitment, which is far beyond what we can do today in the context of a zoning hearing. So details like the inclusion or exclusion of the dormer are really beyond the level of detail that would make sense to incorporate into a zoning proposal. The intention with that alternative is just to demonstrate that that's a possibility within that general style.
Okay, fair enough.
Now, I said that, I suppose you could have a zoning condition that prohibited dormers on.
And
on
it's,
multiple
I don't want to
buildings.
hyper-focus on the dormer. The dormer just sticks out to me as an optic in regards to height and mass.
Okay.
Because I think you mentioned these townhomes would be 40 to 45 feet at their peak. So I would really like to know, though, what is that number? Is it 40 at their peak, or is it 45 at their peak? I'd probably prefer 40 at their peak.
Yeah, so that's complicated. The reason it's complicated is because of the way the city measures height.
Right.
Right? So it's easier on the mixed-use building because when we measure the height of a flat roof building, we measure to the top of the roof, and that's that. With a sloped roof building, we measure to the middle of the roof peak, and unlike a by right colonial style single-family home, the townhomes will have shorter roof pitches, and therefore, as you can see in the image, they would be something more than 35 at the middle of the roof peak and something less than 40. And so if you wanted to recommend, let me say this, if you wanted to recommend a condition that the townhomes be limited to 40 feet in height and the mixed-use building be limited to 45 feet in height, both as the city measures them, that would be absolutely consistent with what we intend to develop and a condition that the applicant would be comfortable with.
Understood. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Follow-up question would be, what appetite would the applicant have for 40 feet at the ridge of the townhomes, not based on the city standard of measurement? Because when you look at this rendering, 40 feet pretty much puts it at what a colonial or what, should that area change, we would all be sort of equal in that regard.
In a second, I'm going to turn around and consult with our
Yeah,
engineer.
and we're going to be here for a while, so take your
But
time.
before I do, let me say that I have a little bit of reluctance to changing the nature of the way the height is interpreted on a particular project. It seems to me like it would make more sense to use the city's convention for measuring height and set an appropriate number in the condition, as opposed to setting a specific self-imposed number and a different mechanism for measuring that height. That said, if you'll bear with me just a second, I'll consult with our civil engineer.
And we may get back to it later if you want. If it pleases the chair, I'm not looking for an answer right now. This is just something that you brought up. It might come in the form of a condition, so kind of spitballing that out. And you know me well enough to know I'm reverting back to Wrightsville Beach's height limit of 40 feet at the ridge.
They do it differently than the city does, for
this
sure.
particular.
And these are real, very real images. The architectural design is far from complete, but these are very real images about the actual height of those structures relative to the actual height of a single-family home.
Right.
And so, the concept's on the table. I just want to make sure that if we suggest a condition along those lines, that we think it through and do it in a way that's most realistic for the city to enforce in the years to come.
Absolutely. Fair response. Madam Chair, my next topic of concern beyond height, which I think we could talk about height for a while, but would be the buffering. Could you, Mr. Frank, go back to some of the renderings that show the adjacent patio home sort of to the north? That's a perfect one.
Okay.
Do we have a, I tried to use the GIS to ballpark a number, but do you have any idea between dwellings or structures what that number might be?
So they're not all, the homes that are on the west side of the alley.
Oh, and forgive me, the northernmost structure on your project compared to the southernmost structure north of you, going up Independence.
Yeah, so you have a 25-foot buffer between the northernmost line boundary of the northernmost townhome and the property line.
That's 25 right there.
And you can scale that out relative to the home that's located next to the north and estimate that that's about 75 feet to 80 feet between structures.
Okay. And my number looks to be about 120 or so from when we're looking at Oleander, the CDMU building, to the, I'm not including the structure that's abutting the alley, but the structure that's further west, about 120 feet or so.
I'm comfortable relying on your estimate there,
Yeah,
so I don't have more accurate information to offer.
I didn't get the measuring wheel out, but
You are right that the next home to the north on the alley is located almost directly on the right-of-way line.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, with this proposal, that mixed-use building would be 10 feet further away from those structures than an ADU on the back of an R15 lot would be.
Okay. Last but not least on this round would be, there doesn't appear to be a western elevation of the mixed-use building, so I'm just curious about fenestration on that side.
We didn't produce one, you're correct. I think we've only got one angle so far with a conceptual rendering for the mixed-use building. And again, that's to show general architectural style and
Right.
massing, not intended to show you exactly what it would look like. But that's the closest I can point to suggest what all four facades of that building would look like.
Curiosity is just going towards, there has been a copious numbers of emails and public response to this case. So, the
Yes, sir.
privacy of that adjacent property owner on Hawthorne with a larger structure looking down on them, what kind of windows are we looking at? What kind of light trespass might impact those neighbors? Trying to weigh some of those adverse impacts to what appears to be, I guess just kind of really two properties for that building, from what I can understand. But
Yeah,
would like to know a little bit more about what might be intended there.
And the most significant thing to say with regard to privacy is preservation of those significant mature canopy trees in a much more significant fashion with what we propose than would be required by the law if we all maintained the status quo will help contribute to that privacy. The height of the windows in the two alternatives, what's permitted today versus what we've proposed, is similar, certainly not exactly the same. The cross-section I have here is the townhome, not the CDMU, the mixed-use building, but it gives you, kind of gives you a general idea. And so the spacing between the structures and the preservation of the canopy trees should serve well to provide a greater level of separation and privacy with what we propose than what would be permitted under the law today.
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Pollack?
I want to follow up on a question that Commissioner Kofer asked. In our packet, we have 3 pictures of 3-story and then a picture of a 4-story.
Yes,
The
sir.
proposed elevations. I want to make sure I'm very clear, so let me try and be as precise as I can. Is it possible that what you end up building may not look like any of this? Or is this what you're, is it going to be like the three-story, going to be one of these three?
So I'm just trying to get to that slide. These are the images that you're referring to, yes, sir?
Yeah, those are the ones.
Yep. Are you asking me with regard to massing or with regard to architectural style?
I'm just, great question. I guess let me try and rephrase it. I'm just looking at these, take the four-story out of it for a minute.
Okay.
Are these the elevations that one of these three stories that you're going to be committing to? Or is it possible that you're committing to a concept of a three-story and it may not look like any of these?
Yep, both of those things. So the image that you see is an accurate representation of the massing and general style of the buildings that we would be compelled to build if this is conditional zoning is approved. Or sorry, if we build, they'd have to look like this. From an architectural standpoint, whether that would be the exact siding and the color of the windows, these are concept only, and those are details beyond.
And those are things probably to be ironed out by TRC meetings and whatever. Where I'm going with is there was a prior city council member used to sit up here, and every time groups, applicants would come in front of the city council, and his comment to each of the applicants, and that's in the spirit that I'm asking this, his comment was, our job is to sit here and assess, appropriateness, fit, and that's all I'm trying to do.
Yes, sir, understood. And a self-imposed height limit and a self-imposed three-story limit on the townhomes, together with these conceptual demonstrations of what the massing would look like, are all part of the equation. Those are the controls through zoning that would be imposed on the details related to that townhome, or those townhomes, excuse me.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lennon.
Can you go back to the R15 worst-case scenario?
Yes, sir. Would you like to see the plan view or the render like that?
Please don't show me the plan view again. The site plan is fine.
The site plan.
The site plan.
Okay. Sorry, a lot of slides.
So I'm assuming you've read the roughly 300 comments that have come in.
Yes, sir.
And one of the overarching themes is to leave it R15.
Yes, sir.
And while I can appreciate Commissioner Pollock's comment about you showing the driveways on Independence, I get it. You did that for a reason. Because I think when the general public says R15, and you tell me if you feel differently, thinks that they're going to replicate what's in South Oleander or Forest Hills on that parcel. When in reality, if it's R15, does your client have to sell all those lots at one time? Could he sell one off at a time?
Would not sell all of those lots at one time.
And what requirement would he have to keep trees at all?
None.
So let me understand. If I purchased a lot from your client, I could cut down every single tree and build my house?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what requirement would I have for stormwater?
Assuming that the lots were subdivided and sold sequentially as opposed to all at once, none.
None?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So whether I have 7 driveways on Independence or 7 driveways into the alley, if they're in the alley, they all got to come out onto either Oleander or Park. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. So I didn't follow that line of questioning very well. Last thing, there's been a lot of talk about the comprehensive plan, land development code, and I've heard you say more than once that your client has had multiple discussions with staff. Is it fair to say that this site plan and this conceived project was based on the contents of the comprehensive plan and the new land development code?
Yes, sir. My understanding is that those are the guideposts that staff relied upon as they provided suggestions and guidance to us.
And how long has the comprehensive plan been in place?
The current one was adopted in 2016, I think.
Very
Is that-
good.
Yes, sir. 8 years.
Impressive. And was that a public process?
Absolutely. Significant public input.
Okay. So in that report is a growth analysis. Was the comprehensive plan developed assuming that Wilmington would stay static?
No, sir. My understanding is we all recognize that population growth is both inevitable and desirable.
So in fact, by 2040, it's estimated to be 160,000 versus the roughly 121,000 people that we have today.
Yes, sir.
Ironically, if you look at the projection from 2016 comp report, we're almost spot on the trend of where they said we'd be. So my point in bringing that up is your client didn't try and take a square peg and put it in a round hole. Your client used the comp plan as, to your, what was the term you used? A guidepost?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm referring to a staff's reference, but no, in every way, shape, and form, we sanded a round peg to fit the hole as neatly as we thought we could.
Because they followed a document that was created with the realization that Wilmington was going to continue to grow and would continue to need housing of a variety of types. Is that?
Yes, sir. From my perspective, that comprehensive plan and staff's interpretation of that comprehensive plan is the voice of the 120,000 citizens of the city.
Okay. You may not know the answer to this. Has anybody offered to buy this parcel from your client?
I'll turn around and ask him. No, sir.
Thank you.
I have just one thing. Can you go back to the slide, because it wasn't on our landscape plan in our packet. The plan view of the landscaping where existing trees are a different color than new trees.
You bet. So the dark ones are the existing trees to be saved. The lighter colored ones are new trees to be planted.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to look at it again.
I understand.
Longer. All right. I think we're going to give you a break and have a seat, and we will go to the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's time for the public hearing. And each side starts out with the in favor and the opposition each start out with 10 minutes, but since we gave the applicant an extra 6 minutes, we will have 10-minute time for anyone in favor of this item, and we'll have a 16-minute time for anyone here in opposition to the item. Did I get my numbers right? Did I do my math right? Okay. All right, and we'll start with anyone who's here to speak in favor of agenda item 3. Come to the podium and start with your name and your address.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Logan Secord. I'm at 2900 Newtown Drive. I'm here as I'm working on becoming more involved in the city of Wilmington and civic engagement. First of all, I have been in a lot of planning and zoning commission hearings. I want to thank you all for being here. I recognize your job is one with many complaints and very few thank you letters. So this is obviously an evening of high blood pressure, as I'm sure you've had plenty of these, so I want to thank you for that in the first place. Wilmington's growing. You know, I would love to go back and turn back half of the developments and raise the bridge and tell everybody, please don't come here. But we're growing, and so we have two choices. We can grow strategically and deliberately, or we can grow haphazardly. I like to say I would like to not live in Atlanta 3.0. Charlotte's already becoming Atlanta 2.0. And therefore, we must be very intentional about how we grow. I've read through the comprehensive plan, and I've read through this application. As they've noted, it's very much in compliance with the vision that was set forth for this city that since 2016 seems to be extremely accurate. In order to develop this city, we need to develop infill. We have the Cape Fear River, we have the ocean, we don't have the ability to continue to expand out even though that is happening. And nobody wants that to be in their backyard. That is the nature of it. It's no matter where we want to go, there will be somebody who is opposing it, and therefore we must recognize that that is a necessary evil. Mixed-use infill in particular is going to be the strategic way to do this. Throughout the city on a high level, as you guys are called to do, we need to look at this and say, how can we reduce the overall traffic in the city? We can't view this as late 20th century development where you have single-family homes and you have people driving to central locations for the groceries and everything. Having mixed-use development solves that. It reduces the overall traffic of a city. It increases locality. You've got the mall right next to it. You're creating a further way to localize within the city of Wilmington. You're decreasing traffic overall. You're helping transition from single-family homes to the mall area. This is a way to do that. Additionally, this land is not high-quality habitat. It's a small buffer of woods that is in between two very busy intersections, and the developer, I must say, has done a wonderful job making sure that they build this intentionally with green space to support that. So to conclude, as I know it's going to be late evening for y'all, we have to build. It's unfortunate, but it is a necessary evil. The question is how we are going to do it, and this is a far more strategic way to do this than to have yet another D.R. Horton single-family home community priced at $400,000 that is up in Ogden, increasing the overall traffic. So I voice my support for this.
Thank you, Mr. Secord. Anyone else here to speak in favor of agenda item 3? Okay. Is there anyone here who's here to speak in opposition to agenda item 3? I know this is very emotional for a lot of you, so please let the gentleman at the podium speak uninterrupted so that he can not use up his time limit of listening.
Madam Chair, members, commissioners, my name is Dan Monk. I live in the corner of Country Club and Park Avenue, so somewhat affected by this area. I thought what I'd do is this, I was looking through this afternoon.
Sir, I'm going to need you to step closer to the microphone.
Okay, no
Thank
worries.
you.
I thought what I'd do is that this afternoon I was looking through the staff's summary on this application, and I had several thoughts on it and omissions that I thought I'd call out and ask a question about. So if you would bear with me, I'll just hit point by point as we go through it. One of the things they talk is in the application is the extension or the enhancement of the alleyway that comes onto Oleander Drive. One of the aspects they don't speak to is if you were to do that right now, that alleyway is incredibly close to the intersection of Independence and Oleander. So you bring on significant traffic, 300% as they were talking about, 140 units. You're going to be having incoming and outgoing traffic right on an intersection. And I don't see any conversation about that from traffic engineering. So the question I had was why didn't someone take a look at that? Also, I saw in the application and in the staff's report lots of pictures of the proposed units, as well as the circles and the transitions. I have a few thoughts. One of the pictures I did not see are the homes along Hawthorne Avenue, along Park Drive. These houses are 1920, 1940s, cottages, 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. They are very modest, very lovely neighborhoods. In the applicant's application and proposal, they propose a transition looking at New Hanover Center, and just draw the circle, and they're going to be their transition to this residential neighborhood behind them. They never speak of the residential neighborhood. The transition we're all talking about is Hawthorne Drive 1-story, 1.5 to 2-story modest homes to a 4-story, 3,000 square foot townhouse. It is, if I'm living on that area, that's the transition I'm looking at. And by the way, yes, the developer has the owner, he's as an owner the right to build his own property, but it is not all about them. It's about the whole neighborhood and what it does for the neighborhood. One of the things also from traffic engineering perspective, a lot of discussion of Oleander, a lot of discussion of Independence. I didn't hear a word about the traffic on Hawthorne. I didn't hear a word about the traffic on Park Avenue. Park Avenue is a 25-mile-an-hour road. It has speed bumps. It has people parking on it. You can't get 2 cars down it. You have to, 1 car at a time. He waits while you come through. And now we're going to increase traffic by 300%. Similarly, past Park Avenue, you have Country Club. Again, another 25-mile-an-hour road. And you're increasing a significant amount of traffic for people who are going to try to not use Oleander or Independence and come in the back way. There's been no mention of that here whatsoever. And I'd be less than honest to tell you, I think the fact that it was not mentioned was not accidental. Last but not least, we get into one of the things the developer said they would develop is a path along the alleyway to the trail, the Cross City Trail. I actually live on the Cross City Trail at a country club and park. One of the challenges we have west, as you go west of this from Independence and come towards Country Club, is that trail, as lovely as it is, does not have adequate signage, crosswalk protections, what have you, for people. And for people, particularly coming down Park, which is a really light trafficked road at this time, onto Country Club, is make sure they don't get creamed by a car coming across Country Club, which is not signed, which is not a crosswalk. There's been no, all that's been discussed by the staff and it's been discussed by the applicant is, oh, look at what we're going to, we have lovely crosswalks at Independence. By the way, no one's going to put their kid across a 4-lane highway. There's been no discussion of a crosswalk. If you're going to increase the amount of people using a trailway, that sounds politically very positive, and God bless. But boy, you better make sure you can handle the impact on that infrastructure as you head west. Because right now, it's already wanting. So with that, I'll leave that alone. Just a few points. I didn't see any pictures of any of the houses to the west. And that's a real point I want to bring out. Everybody wants to look at Hanover, and I'm the transition point, and that is false. The transition point is this building going west. That whole Midtown neighborhood is fundamentally different. So thank you very much for listening to me and taking the time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I am Grady Richardson, and my office is at 1908 Eastwood Road in Lumina Station in Wilmington. I represent numerous homeowners here. All of the homeowners who are adjacent to the alleyway that would have their backyards staring at this proposed development, as well as others in the surrounding area of the Glenmead, Hawthorne Road, and Park Avenue areas. I don't profess to represent all of them. I'm sure there's some that wish to be heard tonight beyond what I have to say. I would like to request some additional time to go and address the objections that my clients have to this development. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I don't want to keep anyone here longer than necessary, but let's start off with a couple of points. The concept or the terminology that this corner building is a mixed-use building is a pure fiction. You're talking about 32,900 square feet, of which 2,270 square feet are commercial. So 37,000 some odd feet, or 36,000 and some change, is residential. So the manipulation by the applicant is that they come in here claiming that this is a mixed-use rezoning, conditional use, to try and get you to believe that 2,270 square feet satisfies the commercial component for a mixed-use development so that they can come in and completely nuke the site with 40 units. Commissioner Lennon, you were talking about the 7 driveways dumping out on Independence and/or Oleander if they did it by right. That is a far better circumstance and a far better volume than 40 units dumping out on both of those roads, not to mention whatever they might be able to get into the commercial space, whether it's a coffee shop or whatever they're trying to get in there that's never going to work, that those people are going to be dumping out. You're talking about a 6-fold increase from 7 single-family homes to what he's trying to build of 40 residential units. 40 versus 7. Mixed use and diversity of housing is not just simply townhouses and condos stuck on 2,270 square feet of commercial space. It can be duplexes. It can be patio homes. He could take and go for a rezoning to make it like Dramtree down the road, like some of the patio homes that are right there. Up on your screen is what I've labeled Exhibit 1. The yellow circle you see is a 2-mile radius of the subject tract. I want to give you some statistics. If you see all the yellow pins on that, those are existing multifamily townhomes and apartment complexes within the 2-mile radius of this property. Let me give you some figures. That Google image that you see within the yellow 2-mile radius has 6,395 units under construction or have already been built that are apartments and townhome townhome complexes. 6,395. Outside, immediately outside of the yellow circle you see there, are another 895 units, either in construction or approved to be constructed. That brings your total within just a 2-mile radius of 7,290 apartments and townhome units. And they want you to believe, as Mr. Frank said in his, we need housing. You don't need 40 units on 2.3 acres next to single-family homes that have been there for over a century. Now, if the developer wants to put 7 single-family homes on there and nuke all the trees, that's his marketing plan. I would dare say that Mr. Spatrino or whoever the builder is of those single-family homes may whack down all the trees, but whoever's buying these $400,000 and $500,000 homes, which, by the way, aren't very much more than these workforce units that they're talking about building are going to cost anyway. Those people that buy those homes that live,
5 minutes.
that live next to the Glenmead area are going to want trees, and they're going to want nice landscaping if they're paying $400,000 or $500,000 for a house. Independence Boulevard is a DOT highway. I would be absolutely flummoxed if the DOT is going to allow them to put 7 curb cuts onto Independence Boulevard. They're going to make them go down the alleyway. The applicant makes it sound like they're doing everyone a favor by donating 10 feet of land for the alleyway. Make no mistake, he's doing that because he has to do that to get the second access way satisfied. When staff gets up here, I want you to ask them the question of why streetscape buffering is not required. Because your city staff, in trying to answer that question, says that alleys, this is Mr. Mahoney, alleys are not considered streets and do not require streetscape landscaping. On all the materials you've seen from the applicant, it references this alleyway 15 feet existing right-of-way, remember that term, right-of-way. And when they add their 10 feet, 25-foot dedicated right-of-way. What that means is a public city right-of-way. Why does that matter? Because Mr. Mahoney says a right-of-way includes the word street, road, cul-de-sac, highway, and thoroughfare. Alley is not included. Therefore, streetscape is not applicable. You can't have it both ways. If it's a right-of-way, you have to have streetscape landscaping. Also ask your city staff why they're not enforcing the 25-foot radius for fire trucks under the fire code. The plan that they're coming to you with shows a 3-foot radius under the fire code that they want to try and get you to approve. Now, they're going to say, well, that's going to be later for TRC. You know as well as I do, later for TRC means it's going to be forgotten or someone's going to overlook it, and now's the time to address it on the front end. They cannot comply with the fire code on the radius and the median, and you should not allow it on that fact alone. Mr. Mahoney says that transitional buffers shall be required along all property lines where districts of differing intensity abut. All rezoning boundaries go to the center line of any street, right-of-way, or alley. Therefore, the parcel would not abut a district of differing intensity. What? I have no idea what that means. I have read zoning codes my entire life. I have no idea what Mr. Mahoney is trying to say. But what I do know is this. If the streetscape buffering requirement is actually imposed on this, it's going to drastically impact the applicant's proposed development because they're going to have to provide the buffering that these folks who have lived there should get the benefit of. Mr. Chalmers, can you please turn to Exhibit 6. This is the deed that Mr. Spatrino's company took when they paid $410,000 for the property. Will you go to the next page? You see what's highlighted there? Mr. Spatrino, who knew going into this because he'd already dealt with the land that was south of Independence and Oleander when he tried to come in for rezoning and he lost on that bid and went away, he knew that there was going to be opposition. He takes the deed and it expressly says it's subject to the zoning ordinances and restrictions.
1 minute.
So now he wants to come in here armed with the full knowledge that he is paying money that's subject to zoning ordinances, and he wants to change it. I beg to differ that this objectively complies with anything in your, may I have a few minutes, just extra?
I've already granted 6 extra minutes
But he was
public
allowed,
hearing.
may I be, but the applicant's attorney was able to sit up here and give without any.
Oh, yeah, we timed him. That's where the 6 minutes came from. But how many do you need? 3 more minutes?
But all 3, that's fine. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Growth Plan. You know who was one of the primary, if not the author of that plan? Christine Hughes. You've all got in your packet the email that Ms. Hughes sent to you showing you all the blatant violations of that plan of how this project does not satisfy that. How in the world does this plan under section 1.4.1 show minimal adverse impacts on desired character of the existing built environment? How does 1.4.2 show that the intent is to avoid unreasonable impacts such as traffic, parking, litter, shadow, light, view obstruction, odor, noise, and/or vibration impacts on nearby residential areas? It doesn't. How does, under 1.7.3, this show a balance with the need to protect desired neighborhood character, preserve historic resources, and protect the natural environment? How does this comply with 1.7.5? Historic and unique neighborhoods with an abundance of desired character should be protected and conserved through the use of zoning, reinvestment, or other tools. Will you go to Exhibit 8, please? Should be an infill article where Linda Painter was quoted. Can you go to the second page? This is out of the Wilmington Biz. Ms. Painter is quoted as saying that those housing types that are referred to as missing middle includes everything in between single family and your traditional walk-up apartments, such as duplex, triplex, quadruplex, townhomes, courtyards, and two-story walk-ups. Why can't the applicant do single-family homes, which my folks are fine with, or do something like Dram-Tree? That satisfies the missing middle. You have over 7,000 multifamily units within a 2-mile radius of this tract. You don't need 40 townhomes here. Enough is enough. I've grown up in this city. I have seen it. Nobody in my group says or denies that growth isn't happening. We understand that. But why do we have to go and put 6 times, all under the guise of a mixed-use development, 6 times what could be built there right now? That is not harmonious. You know it's not harmonious. This isn't a not in my backyard argument. I represent 2 towns in Brunswick County as a town attorney. I sit in the middle of developers and folks against them. I represent developers and I represent folks like this against them. I know the arguments. There is no way that this proposal comes anywhere close to satisfying your land code or your comprehensive plan or your future growth. It's not within the areas either of this bubble they're talking about. Everything you see on that, look at the property. Look at what it's next to. It's no townhomes. You've got the ones behind Hanover Center. He just wants to maximize profit, fine. But he's doing it at the expense of my folks. And the last thing I'll say is this. Workforce housing, that's what this supposedly came in under. There's nothing in...
There's no workforce housing.
He hasn't mentioned it tonight, but it's all in the articles. But you're talking about 10% having to be set aside for workforce housing. That's 4 units. How are 4 units for workforce housing, which I don't believe anybody can afford, a city employee, law, first responders, could afford these homes? How is 4 units greater than the folks that are here in existence first and took their properties in reliance upon the zoning ordinances, and they knew what they could and could not do when they bought their property? Everybody is here that's in opposition of this. I would just ask to stand up. We would respectfully request that you recommend a denial of this application. It is too much. It is not harmonious with the surrounding neighborhood community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'd like to, before we have the applicant come back up, I'd like to have the staff address some of the code issues that were brought up. Would you come back up to the podium, Mr. Mahoney?
Chairperson Lyle?
Yes.
I'm sorry, we have to take a captioner break.
Oh, that's
We have
right.
a closed captioner tonight.
Yes, we will be taking about a 10-minute break to let the closed captioners rest their hands. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. All right. The Planning Commission meeting is called back to order. And to confirm, all the additional time was used up for the public hearing. That was a total of 19 minutes, so the public hearing is now closed. And we have some questions from the public hearing that I want to make sure we address. And so we'll have the staff, we're just going to throw a few of them at staff, and whoever is available and wants to talk about it, you can. The streetscape question about the alley, let's start with that.
Yes, Madam Chair. Per city code, streetscape landscaping shall be installed abutting a street right-of-way as measured from the outside edge of the right-of-way inward. When you go to the city's definitions within the Land Development Code, there is a rule of interpretation regarding right-of-ways, which states that the term right-of-way includes the word street, road, cul-de-sac, highway, or thoroughfare, whether designated as public or private, and then it says alley is not included unless specifically indicated, so therefore the streetscape landscaping is not required along alleys.
Okay, does it give a definition of the width of an alley?
It does not, no.
Okay, and let's address the CDMU question regarding the amount of commercial space that the applicant has in their commercial building versus what is required and how that was reduced.
Yes, there's an allowance within that code section for commercial district mixed use. Sites within a quarter mile of a full-service grocery store entrance are permitted to reduce the commercial square footage to 5% of the total building square footage, so long as there is a paved pedestrian or multi-use path provided from the site to the grocery store.
So the percentage of commercial space in this proposal is meeting the requirements of the code?
That's correct.
Let's talk about workforce housing. You know, that's close to my heart. And a lot of terms of called affordable housing, workforce housing, they're thrown around a lot. So would you share a little bit about what our codes define workforce housing and what the incentive is, and let us know if this is being used on this property, on this project. So I want to make sure we clear that up for the folks here who asked the question.
Yes, the code allows for some density bonuses within certain zoning districts and uses for workforce housing. It is not being proposed as part of this project. I know that was referenced within the commercial district mixed use. The cap on density may be eliminated if 10% of the total number of residential units is designated as workforce housing for a period of at least 15 years. But again, that's not being utilized within this project.
Okay. And tell us about the access, the crosswalks. I know we have the Cross City Trail, and there's going to be some improvements to that with this proposal. And there was a question about the crosswalks across Oleander and across Independence.
We have members from traffic engineering and city engineering who may be better suited to answer that question. I'll defer to Dennis or Rob on that.
What was the question?
There was a general question about the crosswalks and if they were going to be maybe signalized or given a little more safe, becoming more safe somehow. So.
Gotcha, yeah. So this site is positioned between two signalized intersections, one at Oleander Drive and one at Park Avenue. Both of those intersections currently have signalized pedestrian crossings across Independence Boulevard. The Oleander, I'll call it a four-legged intersection. There are crossings across all four legs at that intersection, so there's good pedestrian access throughout the area.
Great. Are there any additional measures that traffic engineering in general would use to make them safer than the ones that we see here?
I mean, they're standard signalized pedestrian crossings. You press the button, you wait for the walk symbol, it displays walk, and then it provides the countdown timer to let you know how much time there is remaining to continue crossing the street. They're used all over the state, at least in that manner.
And they have the speakers for the...
Correct, yeah, there are audible pedestrian signals at Oleander Drive. I believe only 2 of them are installed currently. The North Carolina Department of Transportation has a project to install the remaining 3 legs of the intersection.
Great. And the fire code turning template in our packet, if it's on there, I can't read it at this scale, doesn't show the radius that was used. I know we put them through a concept TRC drawing meeting for the fire trucks. Is there a radius? These look like larger than 3-foot radiuses, but can you speak to that? Or
The diagram that I've seen that shows the fire truck entry, there's a fire station on Park Avenue, which is very close to this site. It is very likely this fire truck would enter from Independence Boulevard, as was shown in the turning templates. It does appear to me, I don't see a radius on this diagram, but it appears to me that the radius along Independence Boulevard is larger than 3 feet. It looks like it's designed to allow the fire truck for ingress and egress from that driveway.
Okay. Staff, is there anything else that you heard in the public hearing that you want to address specifically? No? Okay. We'll bring the applicant up for other, some of the other questions. One of the questions was about looking at the traffic and how it might leave the site versus through via Park Avenue.
So it's possible today to traverse north on the alley to Park Avenue. The section of the alley from the north end of this site to Park Avenue will not be improved in connection with this rezoning. It will stay in the condition that it's in today, which is pretty rough. The alley as it exists today is so difficult to traverse that the post office won't use it. I don't think it's available for fire equipment at all. And certainly our understanding, based on our discussion with staff, is that any homes constructed on this property will need to have fire access to Independence, therefore, accordingly. So your question, I'm sorry, I'm answering what I think your question is, but I'm reading from your face that I may not be. Am I not responding to what you're asking me to respond to?
I was just looking at the turning radiuses, so I appreciate you being concerned about that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that was mainly, if that was looked at, I think was the general question about traffic going other places besides Oleander and Independence and how it might go into the neighborhood a little bit.
Got it. Yeah, the only path that would allow a vehicle to enter or leave this piece of land, regardless of how it's developed, without using Independence or Oleander, would require traversing that unimproved section of Park Avenue. And since you brought up the radius, we did go through multiple conversations with technical staff to evaluate and make sure that what we're proposing is realistic to be approved at a technical level. We got to get more detailed. That's the process, as you all understand. But have every reason to believe that we have proposed a design here that includes appropriate radiuses and widths for fire equipment to access the site.
Okay, yeah, and it wouldn't be approved without that, so.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Any other questions for the applicant?
May I respond briefly to some of the things we heard in the
Absolutely.
public hearing? Is it appropriate for?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We were copied on a couple of letters of support, one from the Wilmington Housing Coalition and one from Jeff Walton, both today. And that's why I'm asking about them, because they came in so close to the hearing. I wanted to ask whether you all received those as well. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. We don't share our opposition's lack of confidence in the city staff. Staff's conclusions here are well-reasoned, well-considered, and most importantly, are objective assessments by technical experts. There's a lot of time and a lot of heart and soul that they put into their analysis of whether or not a plan is consistent with the comp plan. A couple points of clarification. First, this site does include a path from the alley to the city's multi-use path. It's located along the northern boundary of the site, and you can see it clearly here. Second, each R15 lot anywhere in the city, including here, would support a large single-family home and an accessory dwelling unit, not just a single-family home. Chairwoman Lyle, you mentioned workforce housing. In this case, the vision is to sell the homes. So the multifamily style homes in the mixed-use building will be condominium units. The city's code and the density bonuses that are provided in the city code in connection with workforce housing all relate to rental of homes. And so we haven't gotten to the point yet where the code contemplates sale of homes and a zoning opportunity in connection therewith. I mentioned to you the condition of the alley already. If I could briefly respond to the slides that Mr. Richardson proposed, would you mind pulling those up, Mr. Chambers? I just want to look at the first one, that wide aerial view with the 2-mile radius, and then the second one with the deed. Those are the only ones I need to make quick notes about. This image, of course, like any, affords an opportunity for multiple interpretations. As I see it, this is a fantastic demonstration of the very need for condominiums and townhomes close to that red pin. As you can see from the yellow marks on the image, the existing diversity of home types are all, not all, primarily a greater distance away from the center of the map. And we've got a relative dearth of that kind of home type close to the center of this neighborhood, close to that intersection of Oleander and Independence. Could you bump to the deed for me, please? So.
I'm sorry, which one was it?
I'm sorry, I don't recall the exhibit number, but
Six,
the
the
deed
deed.
included a warranty exception on the second page of the deed. And I can just, yeah, there we go. So day to day, when I'm not involved in zoning and public-private partnership matters, I handle real estate transactional work. That's my bread and butter, my trade, day in and day out. An exception on a deed warranty for applicable zoning is standard. It's a given that when you convey land, you convey it subject to whatever the zoning of the land is at the time that it's conveyed. There's nothing remarkable or unique about that with regard to this transaction. Thank you. I don't need anything further from those exhibits. The Bowen study that we highlighted at the beginning of our presentation, not our work. We didn't produce that. New Hanover County produced that. Bowen is the name of the consultant that the county hired. I just want to be abundantly clear that the objective analysis identifying a need for more homes in our community is not something that we created. It's something that we as a community, as a county, solicited and obtained. So finally, let me talk about the neighborhood. The neighborhood, as I see it, is similar to the way that staff has defined the neighborhood. It includes all corners of this intersection and the land radiating out from it. If you were to interpret this differently, if you were to interpret the northwest corner of that intersection and outward as its own neighborhood, it would be a purely residential thing. That is not the way that we want to plan our city. Silos of uses bounded by roads is exactly the opposite of what we are trying to achieve. All of this discussion about transition of uses from one to another, mixing of uses to get homes closer to commercial amenities and the like, is based on the premise that it's more desirable to incorporate mixes of uses over a much greater scale in a neighborhood. And so as you evaluate this, I encourage you to consider the neighborhood here as the totality of land surrounding that intersection. The comp plan and our city staff represent the interests and needs of 121,000 citizens. That is a very deliberate, thoughtful plan put together over a significant period of time and analyzed by a team of technical experts. Tonight you heard from 70 to 80 people who live nearby who would prefer for the use of this land to not change. Please don't lose sight of the silent majority, the citizens who aren't here tonight and who are represented by the comp plan and staff and their analysis of it. This isn't supposed to be a popular vote. It isn't a popular vote. But to the extent that it were, I hope that you'll take into account the needs of all the citizens as represented by that comprehensive plan and staff's analysis of this project. If you have any other questions for me, I'm interested to answer them.
Thank you. And now, commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Frank, we're not quite in board deliberation yet, but some of my concern is going to be height. And I've said to this group in workshops that I don't believe are video recorded but audio recorded, that if you win me over on height and vertical integration, I'll become the poster child. I'll go out there and carry the flag. I understand that we're hemmed in on three sides by water. Vertical integration is in this big town, small cities future. Works Sean's little big town, small city thing in there. But at the same time, height can be, it's a legitimate concern for the neighbors. It's a legitimate concern from a board that is in an advisory capacity, as you all know. We're appointed, we are not elected. The elected officials make the final decision. We're sort of your dress rehearsal and vetting committee. But nevertheless, I'm concerned that I do not see a western facade, what is projected out to Hawthorne on the larger building. And I feel like that, that the height of those townhomes, the ridge, could potentially be 40, which would match up with any development around that gets redeveloped. And I told you at the beginning when we asked questions, you guys could take the night and talk about it, but do you have any responses for me on that?
Yes. I'm sorry I didn't understand your last comment, though.
It wasn't really a question, it was a bunch of verbal.
No, I want to understand so that I can
So,
respond.
so two things. One, we've got a 4-story building
Yes.
that I believe is capped around 45 feet in height.
Not around. Yes,
Around.
45 feet.
And
Yeah.
what does that building look like on the western facade, on the western elevation? Which would tell us what the neighbors on Hawthorne would be seeing from their backyards. Or vice versa, conversely, what those residents in that building would be looking down at. I would kind of like to know what that elevation is going to be. I'm not saying give exact perfect renderings, but some kind of comment there. And I do feel like the height of the ridge on the townhomes perhaps should be capped at what we project any kind of redevelopment of the single-family dwellings around to keep them balanced, to fit and flow into what may not be the fabric of that surround today, but 50 years from now or whatever zoning takes us to, it could be. So, I mean, those are really the two things that I'm just kind of singularly focusing right now on height.
Well, I'd like to respond to those 2 points in sequence and then also generally speak to height, if that'd be all right. With regard to the elevation of the western face of the mixed-use building, the conceptual renderings that we shared are the closest thing we have to show with regard to architectural fit and finish. With regard to massing, there's a commitment, as demonstrated here, for it to be a flat roof building and a footprint consistent with the site plan. I tend to think in terms of conditions to zoning, and we don't typically include architectural details as zoning conditions, but if there's a concern for you that could potentially be addressed by a percentage of the facade, including glazing or something objective that
It's focused on fenestration.
Fair enough. Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely open-minded to that. I'm going to need to lean on our civil engineer a little bit to give me a number for percentage of the facade to be include fenestration and glazing. But I appreciate where you're coming from. I think that's viable. We just need to come up with the right number. Second, with regard to an additional, so the conditional zoning height proposal is 45 feet as measured by the city. If you are suggesting an additional condition that the height of the townhomes be limited to 3 stories and a peak height of, I guess, 42 feet-ish, that's where we were with you build an R15 single-family colonial style home. I don't love it. I don't like having multiple ways of measuring height, but objectively, I'm also not opposed to it. And so if that's a condition that the will of the commissioners is for us to consider, we'll absolutely consider it. With regard to height and transition, what we've proposed here is nominally taller than what is permitted by right in R15. Not just this R15 land, all the R15 land around it. It's significantly lower than the height permitted across the street, catty corner across the street, and south across the street. It's consistent from a massing standpoint with other recent development along the Oleander corridor. The buildings at the range, the buildings that have been approved in the second phase of Summer Walk, all consistent with the general height and massing that we're contemplating here. And you simply can't achieve desirable density without some height. So I would respond to your general question about is this height a good fit or not by saying, yes, absolutely, could probably be taller and still easily make that argument. In this case, you're talking about a 45-foot flat absolute height, which is 3 to 4 feet taller than the peak of a by right structure. It's less than 10% taller than the peak of a by right structure, and across the street from land that could have a 96-foot tall structure on it.
Fair enough. And of course, I do not speak for the commission. We have a range of approaches. I have concerns that my peers may or may not have concerns over. Right now, my singular concern that I'm hyper-focused on is a vertical integration project in, abutting single-family residential. We didn't see that at the range so much. We didn't see that at Summerwalk. We didn't see that as much at the Babies Hospital. So when I look at global Oleander, I'm not seeing this type of interface, which, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Frank.
I live directly behind the Babies Hospital, behind Grandview with a good view of it. Yeah, that's definitely right there.
But you do have a pond between you or the creek there.
I mean, let me not talk about my house. Let me talk about in general terms. So you cannot achieve transition. You can't achieve slope without steps and slope, right? And in order to have steps, you have to have some transition from one use to another, some transition from one height to another. The desirable way to do that is with subtle steps. That's what transition means, as opposed to abrupt ones. What we've proposed here is when you be careful, you need to look at this compared to what's permitted by right in the R15 zone. You can't look at the single-story home that's 100 feet away and say that's the appropriate step for height transition. One day, those homes will no longer be one story. We need to look at, from a height transition standpoint, what's appropriate for what's permitted by the code, and how do we get that subtle step up to the substantial height that we anticipate on the other side of the road. And this is a much better fit for that. At Summerwalk, we were immediately adjacent to 2- and 3-story townhomes, and across the street from single-family homes. The range is a project I didn't work on. I only know it from driving past it. But I see your point that I don't think that there's existing single-family residential development immediately adjacent to it.
And it's simply just, I feel like our role at this level of advisory is to certainly, look to the impact of the neighbors, the immediate neighbors, and a 4-story building across the alley, and I've measured it on the GIS, it's about 120 feet, that there's going to be, there is a transition there. 96 across the street at maximum by right height of, then we're stepping down to 4-story, hypothetically proposed, and then going back down to by right height. So that piece is just the fenestration, which I'm sure Commissioner Adams may weigh in on as well, because he is the resident architect. The second piece is in the event that all of those houses in 50 years are torn down, 20 years tomorrow, they go back up with their by right height. I just feel like that the townhome should be right in line with those. And we've talked about a 40 to 45, so we're talking about height relatively than concrete, and that gives me some pause. So the two things I've got pause on is a fluctuation of height on the townhomes and then no fenestration for us to look at on that taller building.
So let me answer that with specific conditions that would be acceptable to us. First, we've already proposed an overall height limit of 45 feet as measured by the city. In addition to that, a height limit for the townhome buildings that limits their roof peak to 42 feet is also acceptable to us, which is my best estimate of the roof peak of a by right R15 single-family home.
Thank you, sir. I'll yield now.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to take so long, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? All right, very thorough job. We don't have a lot of questions up here.
Thank you. I'll be nearby should any arise during your deliberations. Please don't hesitate to call on me or our engineer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. What are you thinking on this one, Commissioner Pollack? You want to start? Go ahead.
one thing I would like to ask the professional staff here would be, Mr. Richardson, did I get that right, Grady? Okay. Brian, the 2-mile radius of the site, 7,000 units coming out of the ground, is that accurate?
I have no way to confirm that right now.
Okay. Can we talk to the traffic engineer with regards to a little bit of the massing on that corner of what that impacts from driver behavior? Is that,
Sure,
you
yeah.
allow that?
He's got a microphone, he didn't have to come up, so.
Just not so much TIA studies, but just the psychology of driver behavior. We've had a lot of input from the citizens that that intersection is very dangerous. What from the science would point to the massing on that corner? Would that change driver behavior at all from a technical standpoint?
Driver behavior is its own thing, you know. I would say with this site, moving that driveway as far from the intersection as feasibly possible is the ideal solution for this site. If that driveway were closer to Oleander Drive, it would start interacting with the right turn lane onto Oleander Drive, and that's when we would start seeing some, are they turning in this driveway or are they turning at Oleander, where, you know, rear end collision could start occurring. So I think the size and shape of this site, providing that driveway as far from the signalized intersection as possible is the best that we could do for this site.
A follow-up question to that would be back on this psychology of the driver. The 4-story building replacing the lot with trees, when drivers are approaching that intersection, now that it is developed, does that impact right, wrong, indifferent, positive, negative? I mean, any comments there?
The only comment I have regarding that, I mean, you're going to see it, you know, it's going to be new. There is an existing right turn lane on Oleander for drivers that are destined to that facility, you know, to exit the flow of traffic, get in the turn lane, to slow down, to turn into that back access alley. It's no different than any other development on the corner lot.
Thank you.
Well, before we vote, just kind of, let's see where everybody is.
I'll jump in. Just to maybe shed a little light on some of the architectural concerns. Without knowing the floor plan of the mixed-use building, any facade that has a bedroom or a living room on it is going to have windows to basically be code compliant, to call it a living room or a bedroom. So I would have to believe that, again, without knowing the layout, there will be some bedrooms or living rooms on that facade which will require windows. I think one of the most telling things that I saw tonight about this project really were some things that, to me, illustrated maybe more scale compatibility than I would have guessed. The site sections through Hawthorne, the alley, the buildings, all the way out to Independence, where you could see existing building heights, proposed building heights, tree canopies, you know, the massing and that transition, not in use, but I'm talking purely in massing, to me, seems relatively well resolved. I also really think that having the site developed as a whole and what that means for tree preservation versus losing all the protection of thinking about it as single-family lots is also an important consideration for me. Lastly, I think there are certain places in the city where we think density is more warranted. And to me, this is one of those infill sites where if someone can walk across Independence and not have to get in their car to go to the mall or to go shopping, these are the kind of sites that we need to find creative ways to utilize them. So I'm in support of this project.
You want to go next?
We'll just keep going. My first house in Wilmington was on Hawthorne, and I would have voted for the project back then, and I'm going to vote for it tonight. We have a comprehensive plan that was put into place in 2016 that over 600 residents participated in. And we have told the development community, we collectively, the city, city planning, city council, all we do is advise. We've told the development community, this is what the city needs. And this is all out there. This is all out there for you all to read. Mr. Richardson's map of 2 miles, my answer, forgive me, who cares how many apartments there are within a 2-mile radius? There are people living there. There are people.
The public hearing is over.
There are people living in those apartments and in those townhomes and in those condos and working in this city and paying taxes. And we are going to continue to grow. And this to me is the perfect product for this. And my most compelling reason is because, again, it's exactly what the comprehensive plan asked for. And that's what we've been given.
Go ahead. I'll go last. The public hearing is over. Did you get the security? Go ahead.
I have listened to my peers. I respect their opinions. I'm just going to, those that know me, I'm pretty blunt to the point. At this point, I can't support this project.
Yeah, my take on it is this is what we wrote the codes for, projects just like this. And there was a lot of time and energy put into it. I know it's emotional for a lot of change to happen in communities when you've lived there for a long time. They're big. And that's just a sign of a growing city. We live in a place where people want to move. So I think about a year and a half ago, when we got a project similar to this, Commissioner Lennon said, buckle up, because this is exactly what we asked for, and this is what we're going to be getting. And so I don't see any, when our charge is to look at the project and compare it to our comprehensive plan and our LDC, I don't see any reason to vote against it.
We talked a little bit about the geographic parameters of Wilmington. It is surrounded by water on 3 sides, and I've already told my peers and colleagues on this commission, as well as the public, that vertical integrations in the city's future, it is difficult. It's a delicate balance to bring properties up 4-story. I feel like this is a very unique site. I look at for me personally, my grandparents' house was on the corner of Park and Essex. My grandfather graduated from New Hanover High School in 1928. When I look at I look personally to my elders for a guide to the future of Wilmington. I look at what did Wilmingtonians that came before us want? What was the precedent or intent that they set? What roadmap did they give us to follow as we modernize our city, as we grow as a city? The comp plan is also a beautiful document, a wonderful working policy document with tons of public input, stakeholder input, technical staff input, the community coming together and producing a really great roadmap. So my approach is always to balance those two, the nostalgia of history and the future. When I look at the history of this area, Mr. Richardson's right. You know, this section of north of Oleander was platted in 1925. But I also look at Oleander apartments. They were built in about 1951, the same year my father was born. So why did the folks that platted Mr. McCray in 1925 allow for multifamily properties? Then I look at the 1945 zoning map of the area. 1945 zoning map was also approved in 1965. R1, R2, R3, those were kind of the labels. There was no such thing as R15 probably until sometime in the 80s. But the subject site across from it, the south side of Oleander, not only did it have multifamily that was built in the early 50s, it also had those two commercial tracts on the corner. The south side of Oleander and Independence were zoned at the time R2 and R3. And if you look at the key for the zoning map, it was multifamily. The McCrays at some point in the 70s decided to deed one over to a bank, so they injected commercial into that neighborhood. And they also had the other tract that is still commercial today. So when you look at, yes, the beautiful fabric of the neighborhood, to preserve and protect it, but we also take it a step back in the 50s and in the 40s, what was happening before many of you were living here. And I feel like this is what, if the McCrays were today, would probably be doing. I don't know why that family and their altruism and philanthropy gifted land to parks, to schools, to churches. Why did they not make this a true buffer? Why? That's a question that's gone through my head several times. Maybe you guys can find the answer and enlighten me, but they didn't do that. They did not zone this property into a conservation easement. I don't know why, but they didn't. And here we are today. So there's not a whole lot of objections for me other than height. I'm the height, the height naysayer here. I would be comfortable moving forward for this to go to our elected officials, collectively our elected officials, with the height of the townhomes, the ridge at 42 feet, which would eventually be in line with any kind of redevelopment next door or behind on Hawthorne, and that the applicant provide western elevations for the public to see. I think that the public deserves the right to know what that western facade elevation looks like before this made it to city council. I don't know if technically if those kind of conditions are allowed. You guys have to advise on that, but.
So you want to add that as a condition for the 42-foot?
I would say the ridge of the townhomes at 42 feet, unless someone here objects.
I don't think, I think that we need to keep with the consistency of how we measure height.
So you would object to that condition?
Yeah, I probably would. If we had to amend it, I would probably vote against it.
Okay. I could probably work around that with a forwarding some kind of email to the council, city council, to give my opinion of it.
But definitely it's a good recommendation to the applicant to get those elevations. And go back to that slide, please, that has the trees with the ones that are existing versus the ones that are proposed, because that makes a big difference. The trees that are going to be planted with the development are going to be small, but the ones that are out there now are large, and so that'll make a big difference in the. So, are we ready to vote? What's the will of the commission? Commissioner Lennon?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion for the approval of agenda item number 3, a request to rezone 1320 Independence Boulevard from R15 to O&I CD. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. And the Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable in the public interest, as the proposal includes additional housing units along two major corridors while serving as a transition from higher intensity uses in the existing neighborhood to the west. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Commissioner Lennon has moved to approve agenda item number 3. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Commissioner Kofer with the second. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving agenda item number 3, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
The motion passes 4-1. Okay, we'll continue on with the new business in just a moment. Commissioner Pollock will need to leave due to a family emergency. And so I just want to verify, Mr. Attorney, that we still have a quorum.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. Agenda item number 4 is a conditional district rezoning of property containing 10.27 acres located at 120 Switchyard Road from MFMHLCD, that's a lot of letters, to MD10C, medium density multiple dwelling residential conditional district for 60 attached townhomes. And Mr. Mahoney is here with our staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. This site is located on the west side of Switchyard Road, south of Market Street. It is approximately 10.27 acres and is currently vacant. This map shows the site with the surrounding area and photos of the subject property. And these are photos of the subject site from the surrounding roadways and the existing conditions of Switchyard Road. These are adjacent land uses, primarily office, commercial, retail uses located along Market Street and Switchyard, as well as a stormwater pond that's located east of the site. The site is located in an area that's currently zoned MFMH, like LCD, which is multiple family residential district, medium high density legacy conditional district. Commercial zoning is located to the north along Market Street and to the east along Cinema Drive. There's multi-dwelling zoning located to the southwest as well. The applicant is proposing to rezone the site from this existing MFMH LCD district to an MD10 CD district. That's a medium density multiple dwelling residential district. This is for a 60-unit residential development. As you may recall, this was rezoned from CS, Commercial Services District, to the current zoning district to allow for a 192-unit residential development. This was done on September 8th, 2020. This project offered 10% of the proposed units, which would be 19 units, as an affordable housing component for a period of 10 years. The improvements associated with this plan included the construction of Switchyard Road and Dalmatian Lane, which is a connection over to Cinema Drive. These improvements have been constructed, but no site work on the development site has commenced at this time, only the roadway improvements. Here is the currently proposed site plan. This consists of 14 townhome buildings containing a total of 60 units. Which is a reduction in 132 units from the previously approved plan. Each unit will contain 3 bedrooms. With this proposal, no workforce housing is proposed as part of this submittal, thus creating a reduction in 19 affordable housing units from the previously approved plan. These are proposed conceptual building elevations provided by the applicant. The comprehensive plan identifies this site as within a high-density transition area of opportunity and an urban mixed-use center. On the growth strategies map. Areas well suited for infill development should be redeveloped in a way that maintains or enhances the desired character, increases housing options, and improves overall quality of life in the vicinity. New development and density increases are encouraged for sites within close proximity to commercial services, employment centers, and transit routes. Staff notes that the proposed rezoning does reduce that number of dwelling units from the previously approved plan and does not propose an affordable housing component, although the proposed zoning would allow for compatible development that is still near commercial services and transit stops. Therefore, staff believes the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the request is reasonable in the public interest, and we recommend conditional approval with the conditions in the case summary be applied. That concludes my presentation. The applicant's here as well with a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Do we have any questions for staff at this time? I do have one. Did the, losing the workforce housing units, did that give staff pause in recommending approval?
It did. I think you can see that reflected in the policy analysis. There were some reductions from the previous approval for the reduction in the affordable housing component that was proposed. So we did take that into account, but though still we weighed the additional units near commercial services and transit stops that are proposed with this site, and the protection of the wetlands on site as well was weighed in staff's recommendation for approval.
Okay. Commissioner Adams.
We heard earlier tonight that workforce housing is really about for rent housing, and it's hard to make it applicable for sale housing. Do you know, is this a change more than likely between a for rent original rezoning to a for sale?
If you don't mind, I'll defer that question to the applicant.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We'll invite the applicant to come forward.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name's Cindy Wolf, and I'm here with Joe Sabino, who is the developer's representative for this. Should we do this down? Good. We appreciate staff's thorough summary of it, and based on the hour of the night, obviously, I don't want to repeat anything that was unnecessary. As far as the project, as he pointed out, improvements of Switchyard and the connection to Dalmatian were already made. There has been clearing and grading around there, but no development had started. This is actually a downzoning that sort of comes into play with the number of units, but also the factor of the affordable housing. And as he pointed out, but I've got them sort of side by side, we're basically developing the same area. However, the former project was a for rent project. It had 192 units. The reason, not totally, but a lot of the reason for the affordable housing component was because it was more than 17 units an acre. The new project is, down below 10 units an acre, and so therefore that's why we're asking for the zoning of MD 10 rather than the MD 17 with the affordable bonus. But I just want to point out with these two scenarios that we're still protecting the same amount of open space. There's a tiny bit more of, I guess, clearing around the edges of where the multifamily buildings were. However, we're not having any more impervious surface than was part of the initial project. So this is the plan that we're working with. We've got 30 units in the upper section and 30 units in the lower section. They are a for sale, a single-family attached townhome style. And that is sort of what we seem to be referring to of late as that sort of missing middle. As Mr. Adams pointed out, it is a lot tougher, not that it's impossible, to work with the affordable component with a for sale. But generally speaking, it's obvious that the economy of size and scale and everything else, going from 192 units, even though there were rentals, to the 60 units with individual ownership, it makes a difference. Now, that being said, too, I also feel that based upon the location of this particular project, there's going to be a certain affordability for it because market rate is impacted highly by where it is in the city. So you've got the best of both, we believe, here. It's a for ownership. You're in the city. You have a lot of access to services and that sort of thing. but I believe that the cost would not be as high as being in some of the more premier sections of town. We are showing these as the elevations back and front. We have a real combination here of the units, and they'll vary because some of the backs and some of the fronts will go back and forth depending on whether they're facing Switchyard, they're facing the railroad, the other rights-of-way. We have had our preliminary review by TRC, and we had to make some changes, in fact, to make sure that those elevations had their orientation either towards a street facade or a green space, and we have taken care of all of that. The purpose in this was just to show that their architect has sort of given some thought either way to whether it's a more traditional style or a contemporary. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions. We certainly believe that the infill development makes sense here where services and utilities, everything is available. Location-efficient housing is promoted and encouraged for sustainability. And as I said, we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Commissioner Adams?
As you can imagine, it's unusual for us to see downsizing of
It's like,
density.
what's the catch?
So I'm trying to understand what's causing this other than a difference in the economic climate of rental versus ownership, multifamily. And I also wonder, is there something that would preclude you from just building less density in a similar way under the existing zoning? Because the existing zoning really talks about density per acre.
There was no real reason other than the not stigma, but the bonus of saying, hey, we're going from multi-dwelling 17 to multi-dwelling 10 because we don't have more than 10 units an acre on the plan. So regardless, because one of the factors or the conditions of the previous 192 apartment zoning was that it's over 17 units an acre, therefore there had to be 10% of affordable housing set aside, we had to come to this modification. So they couldn't have developed this in the old scenario without setting aside the 10% of affordable housing. And in this particular case, at 60 units, that's sort of unbearable.
So there was a percentage associated with
That's
the
correct.
conditionals?
Like,
Okay. All right, that
condition
helps
number
clear it up.
8 was, your project shall set aside 10% of whatever units, and that's how it sort of reads, as affordable. So not only is it rental, and that makes it a little more difficult to tie down the affordable, but also because of the reduction in units.
We talk about affordable housing a lot. We just heard someone really tout 10% of a project being affordable housing. What prevented you from, I guess, maybe still trying to incorporate in some percentage or some aspect of integration of an affordable component, and that might mean mixing for rent and for sale?
That's just not the scope of the project, and maybe you want to, sure, please. Oh, yeah, yeah.
My name is Joe Sabina. The name of my firm is called TBM Partners. I'll admit this is my first rodeo in front of the commission, but I am active in Wilmington and New Hanover County right now. My company's family owned. I'm actually the development company, sister company to Roebuck Homes, which is a privately held home builder out of Raleigh that's been building homes for since 1926, literally. They are not a for-rent developer, that's first and foremost, so it's not what we do. We just don't see this being practical for a for-rent. We're a market rate, fee simple builder, developer. Actually, our intention on this is, if you look at where the proximity of this site is, it's a gritty area that is adjacent to an active railroad line. By default, these are not going to be $700,000 townhomes. There's plenty of risk as it is right now, developing this site, basically hoping and assuming that people are going to be able to pay a fair price for a house right up against a railroad track. That said, we believe in this site because of the location and the proximity to the riverfront and downtown. Our intent, and I got to be very careful how I say this, is to provide a market rate product that is achievable by most. And I think that's probably, I think affordable housing is misused because it's a very, very difficult metric to meet from the federal standards. What I like to reference or refer to it more as achievable housing, which is, if you think of all the home buyers as a big bell curve, the big wide band of that bell curve can afford these houses based on the price we're paying for the land and the proximity. Market forces are going to pretty much dictate our ceiling on this, and they're not going to be really, really high priced townhomes. That said, we believe that this is a great opportunity to provide people home ownership in a good location that over time will probably get better and more attractive from an overall submarket within the city. So I know I feel like I'm dancing around that, but I've got to be very careful about committing to an affordable housing when there's so much that, as a developer and then the builder I represent, don't have control over it. You know, this just isn't, in my opinion, practical for the federal mandate for affordable housing if it's fee simple. That poses another philosophical question too on the whole purpose of affordable housing. If you have 60 homeowners in there and you designate, say, 6 for the 10% as affordable, and everybody else is fee simple, by default, economically, you're going to have to force the 54 homeowners that own their house to pay more to subsidize the 6 houses that are affordable. For a rental property, that's a lot easier to justify. But for fee simple, you get into a lot of philosophical challenges there. Is it really ethical to require 54 people to pay more for their house so 6 others can pay a lot less? I would argue that that's not the responsibility of the 54. It should be the responsibility of the entire population through taxes or incentives to support affordable housing. You may disagree with that, but that's, if that answers your question, hopefully that does. I'm trying.
Commissioner Lennon?
I just want to also back up, because Ms. Wolf, you know the code, I think, better than most, but the city didn't really said thou shall. The city said, if you make 10% affordable, your density can exceed the 17 units
That's right.
per
That
acre.
was the previous
Right.
development, yes.
Right, I just didn't want to make it sound like that had been mandated. That was,
No.
Right,
That
that
was
was
a condition that was worked out.
right. So in that respect, I think our land development code worked because you were able to maximize the density on the site. What the land development code really can't react to are market conditions. And so I think what this says to me is the market for 190 apartments is a lot different than the market for 60 fee simple condos, plain and simple. That's my humble
It is.
takeaway.
The question came up regarding apartments. Just economically right now, making an apartment deal with that few units is really challenging for any apartment developer out there, anywhere. You really have to be above 250. Now, in the good old days, when interest rates were really lower unit, below 250 units for multifamily was achievable, and they were all over the place. It's really tough to make those work now.
No, I got it. I guess what I'm saying is I think this is an example, as one councilman is known to say, is the market is telling us something, and the market's telling us that the massive amounts of apartments being built, that problem's fixing itself.
In a way, it is.
Yeah, we're good. I just, I mean, I hate to lose the affordable units, I really do, but I also, I think the point's well taken that the pricing is going to reflect a lot of different things, and every door is a good door in terms of affordability. That's mine.
Yeah, well said.
Assuming that the design is good.
That's right, because form matters. And every unit is affordable to somebody. That's right. So that's one reason I don't like the term affordable housing, because it doesn't really have any meat to it until you put a number, a number behind that of how much a person makes. So naturally, getting a lot of products out there. We have a lot of missing middle on our agenda tonight, and so that's means the code changes that we made are working. So I was really pleased to see all that. And I don't miss the apartments. I think this is a great land design and making the most of that site.
Well, and for what it's worth, every single municipality that I work in several right now, the conversation could be, just the faces change, but the conversation is the exact same. Every single municipality is wrangling the same challenges and dealing with really what that definition of affordable is. Is it, the federal mandate's one thing, but then it's the whole, like as I use my bell curve, achievable. It's a tough one to, it's a tough
And we
nut to
definitely
crack.
need housing that's affordable to folks making on the lower end of the,
Yeah.
but as John mentioned, that's not forced on anybody. It's up to the market and the developer choices. So. How you doing way down there?
I'm fine.
Any other questions I can
Anybody
answer? I'm
else?
here at your disposal.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 4?
So much quieter. Much better. That's the type of zoning and planning hearings I prefer, much more quiet. Logan Secor, 2900 Newtown Drive, Wilmington. I want to again voice my support on this one, but take a little bit more of a tougher stance on this. So there's two things that I want to highlight that I would recommend that you ask about, place any conditions of approval around, but again, I still am fully supportive of this for all the reasons that I previously outlined, that we have a problem, we need doors, and this. First being the wetlands. It is unclear on these drawings what exactly the setbacks to those wetlands are and what mitigation features are going to be there. I am a developer, not a Wilmington developer. You're never going to see me here for a hearing. But needless to say, I've seen a lot of stormwater and erosion control, and if it's a 25-foot, field of grass between all of these townhomes and a wetlands, that's just not going to do it. I can guarantee there will be issues with it. That is not something that will prevent, the development. There are things that they can do, and you can ask them to say, like, what can we do to make sure that we're protecting high-quality wetlands on that. So just a little tweak to make sure that we're protecting that. Secondly, I am 29 years old and a homeowner, and people hear that and look at me like I have a second head. And that is because of where the housing market is. I grew up in a home that was $130,000. My house is $335,000. I am 29. Housing prices are going through the roof, and it is making it almost impossible for the people who make your coffee, or if there's a fire to come get you, or to work at the normal storefront. Except for all of the New Yorkers and the Floridians coming down here, it is becoming very, very, very difficult for people to have homes. Now, this is a great opportunity just by the market price in the area, but if the market price is lower, making voluntary commitments on that part of the developer should be a lower burden in the first place. Secondly, they, put it that prices would have to be higher on the 54 in order to pay for the 6, except for the developer who's financing all of this, right? I know as we all do, people have to make money, but there's a point where a corporation, big or small, can take a step, and I have done it. I have said, I am willing to reduce my return because I'm part of this community. I want to make a positive impact. And so to say, all right, I'm going to take a little bit of a return hit on 6 of these 60, or whatever it may be, in order to support, because one day I may have to call an ambulance and the person who's going to be the paramedic isn't making $100,000. So fully supportive of this. Questions to be asked, still hammering on the, making sure there's wetland setback. That's something that's totally solvable, and encouraging, what can be done on affordable housing. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else here to speak in favor of agenda item 4? Anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item 4? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Does the applicant want to respond to anything in the public hearing?
Yes, thank you. In this particular case, I'm sure you're all aware that over the past several years, there have been some changes in the jurisdictional regulations. We have core sign-off. This is not, in fact, exemplary wetland area. It is isolated. We could technically clear it all and work in it, of course, with the trees and everything else. But as I pointed out, we're still just working in the areas that were previously cleared that are totally upland. So these are wetlands, but they are isolated, so they are not jurisdictional. That being said, our stormwater management will be the same method as before. This particular type of project is a low density. It is less than the 24%. And so the stormwater management and everything else, which has already been thought out and was technically released for construction, will be a series of sheet flow, check dams, open traverse of the runoff, which ultimately will end up in the lowlands of this site, which will not be disturbed whatsoever. So there aren't specific buffers in the COD, the conservation overlays that the city has in the code are not applicable, but we still have those provisions provided in this plan.
Okay. Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Cindy, we repeat that now? So is there a COD? And
there are no COD requirements here. That being said, we're not clearing beyond those wetland lines.
But they are delineated, and so you know where,
Well, and like I said, it is lowland. I'll hesitate to keep using the wetlands. It is lowlands, they are isolated, and so therefore they are not jurisdictional. And if they're not jurisdictional, the code doesn't kick in the COD setbacks specifically.
I'm tracking with you now. Okay,
The
thank you.
stormwater is treated on and retained on site.
That's correct.
So there's
Within
no
those
runoff.
areas behind the units, which sort of trade off as your COD setbacks, had they been jurisdictional.
Commissioner Lennon?
And just to go on the record, even though they are isolated, low-lying areas, because this is CD, if you do these 60 and want to do something down the road, you have to come.
We'd have to be back
You have to
here,
come back.
absolutely. So
Okay.
we're still committing to preserving all of those lowland areas.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Commissioners, do we have any comments before we?
So I appreciate the clarity about why the change. That was helpful. I mean, I fully live every day the implications of multifamily, you know, kind of design and construction. You know, these are creative little tracts of land that I appreciate people figuring out ways to put housing in them. They're not easy, but I think these are the kind of little places that we need to look at. They don't have the visibility and maybe not the drama of the site we just talked about, but still, they're providing housing, and I think we need it.
Well, what's the will of the commission on this one?
Prepared to make a motion if, without objection.
Love it.
Have at it. We are on agenda item number 4.
4.
Okay. I move to approve agenda item number 4, 120 Switchyard Road, rezone from MFMHCDL to MD10CD. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The proposal allows for additional housing units and compatible development near commercial services and transit stops. The Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Commissioner Kofer has moved to approve agenda item 4. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 4-0, motion passes. There's 4 of us left here. All right, thank you, good luck with the project. Our next item is agenda 5, conditional district rezoning of properties containing .57 acres located at 508, 510, 512, and 516 McCray Street from CB Community Business to R3 CD Medium High Density Mixed Residential Conditional District for 6 attached townhomes. And Ms. France back with us to deliver the staff report.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. The site is located along McCray Street between Rankin Street and Campbell Street, contains approximately .57 acres and is currently vacant. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request as well as photos of the subject property. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. And these are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. Residential uses are located to the northeast and south, with the community center and park to the west. The site is currently zoned CB Community Business and is bordered by R3 to the northeast and south and CB to the south and west. The applicant proposes to rezone the subject site to R3 CD, Medium High Density Mixed Residential Conditional District for 2 triplex structures. The project would consist of recombining the 4 lots into 2 with a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet. Access will be provided by a shared drive. In front of you are conceptual elevations of the proposed triplex structures. The site is located within a neighborhood-scale infill development area of opportunity and along a community connector on the Comprehensive Plan's Growth Strategies map. The proposed plan focuses on small lot infill development that enhances and improves the existing physical development pattern of the area. Additionally, the plan utilizes existing utilities and increases housing options while protecting the desired neighborhood character. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Ms. France. Any questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Adams?
One minor clarification, what was the last exhibit in the agenda showed a co-joined 6-unit building versus something different that was described?
Yes, I believe before their community meeting, it was 6 units, and then after the community meeting, it was changed. I would obviously defer to the applicant, but that's my understanding.
All right. No more questions for staff at this time. We'll have the applicant back up.
Thank you.
Thank you again. I'm Cindy Wolf, and I'm here with Joe from TBM. It is another project on their radar. This is a classic infill. It is that taking advantage of the R3 and R5 ability to have attached housing now. You can see it there. We appreciate staff's introduction of it. I actually worked on this project back in 2004, and we had it released for a commercial development with a parking lot out front and a two-story building with a combination of offices and commercial, and I have that old plan in here somewhere. But we do believe that this is much more appropriate with the need of houses and in its location to have housing rather than the commercial use. That exhibit that you saw was in fact the exhibit that was sent out for the community information meeting. After that meeting, it was economy of construction and cost to have 6 all connected together. I was never a fan, and I was able to convince them that this, we believed, was a much better scenario. And so the 2 triplexes on individual lots worked out very well for this. The facades will face the street, have a front appearance, and then the parking around back. We have the similar thoughts on the architecture, but again, they're still evaluating it. We're showing the 3 stories. They may end up being 2 stories, but overall, this type of infill is appropriate. So again, this would probably be the more contemporary because it's an in-town kind of product. But overall, we believe that this proposed R3 zoning is reasonable, consistent, and in the public interest because of its location, efficiency, and because infill development should be implemented with a minimal of adverse impacts on the desired character of the neighborhood, and we believe this does that. There's been a lot going on around these neighborhoods with the infill, and we just want to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Cofer?
Thank you. I do have one question. It's really just a policy question of this process. Just with your comment that these may go from 3-story to 2-story, I mean, is that a variation of the plan submitted to us and then council that's dramatic enough to?
No, there are criteria for major and minor modifications of conditional district plans. Generally speaking, it's a minor if it goes down in the number of parking spaces or down in the amount of gross floor area. I would defer to staff, but I believe that a reduction in the height of a building would again be a minor modification. Major modifications involve changes in driveway location or massing or some things like that. There's a little bit of leeway, and anytime I have a modification of an approved conditional district, I submit it to the staff with my justification of why I think it might be minor, and they make that evaluation, and then it may or may not come back to you. But generally, the 3-story to 2-story.
Yeah. So decrease in intensity, for lack of a better word.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ace, I think the way that's built in is if you look at the development data table, it says 35 feet max. So to me, that allows flexibility lower than that.
She may not have been, this may not be the right time, but there's not many people here. So these guys want to go home and they love to hear me talk late. But, the project could be sold. I mean, all better for you to build and be successful, but, if you're not happy with building it, you may sell it to the next highest bidder, and they've got a conditional district rezoning packaged up, and so I've kind of taken that approach a little bit more.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Thank you. Oh, okay. Whoops.
I apologize. This is just curiosity, and I like your presentations because you summarize the public meetings. I'm just curious, did anybody say anything about the removal of the commercial?
No,
from the
not at
neighborhood?
all. In fact, there was a woman and her son here earlier. They didn't last out that first item, or whatever, third item. But they did comment to Joe when they saw him that they were here sort of in favor or whatever. At first, she was a little obstinate. She just thought 6 was too many. She didn't have a reason for it because technically there could be 11 based upon the R3 and attached housing. So we kept sort of pestering her as, what's the right number? And just not 6. But they were here, and we believe they were going to speak in favor of us. The others were just, there was a gentleman that was excited because he owned some property there, as did she and her son, that just the infill typically improves the values of properties around them that are much older at this point. But no one had a problem with the commercial going away.
I asked that question because the only red,
Yeah, that was the project before. It was a 2-story.
yeah,
sort of
no,
a big
the only,
building.
the only red down arrow in staff report was the, how it encouraged neighborhood scale commercial development, it's too late, development along corridors to serve the
Definitely.
neighborhood. So that's what made me ask the question. I was just curious. 'cause
Well, and
staff-
when this went on sale, Joe was probably the 5th person I talked to. Generally, when things get listed, like in these areas, I get a lot of calls, just,
Yeah.
what can we do? And commercial district mixed use was certainly one of them, because it would have been a by right. But it didn't last.
Understand.
Would you come to the microphone? Sure.
I live in Raleigh, and I live in the city of Raleigh, and I live in a very diverse neighborhood in the city of Raleigh, downtown. I've got kind of a passion for infill stuff. I do it kind of on the side, and so this kind of fits with what Roebuck Homes wants to do as well, and I'm kind of dragging them along, and we're going to look for more in this area as well. We think we can really kind of impact this. Our neighborhood meeting, surprisingly, it's a very diverse meeting. I've never been in a meeting like that when we're talking about infill, when gentrification can be a polarizing term, and everyone was pretty supportive of what we were talking about. Now, you don't have to take my word for that, but it was interesting to me to hear that. Usually it's not the case. The other question was regarding, remind me, please.
She answered it. I was just curious if anybody brought up
Oh,
a
the
concern
commercial,
about
yes, sir.
no commercial.
There was someone, I got this late in the game. I actually been talking to the owner for over a year. Someone else got it under contract before me. I was very upfront when I was making my offer a year ago, saying, this needs to be townhomes. And he's like, no, it's conditioned. I got a guy that wants to use it as is. The previous guy they had under contract apparently tried to do it, went through his due diligence and concluded that he just couldn't make it work for commercial use. And so they called me back, and then that's when we got it under contract. So it's, again, you're hearing that from me, which is kind of like, you know, asking the fox about the hen house in some degree, but,
All good.
you know, that
Thank you.
was, if that provides context, someone did try to make it work under the existing zoning, it got dropped, so the
Thank
seller
you.
came back to me and says, all right, I'm willing to let you rezone it, and so that's why we're here.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, it's time to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 5? Anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item 5? All right, the public hearing is closed. Commissioner Adams?
Everything I said about the last project is even more true on this one. I'm especially appreciative of utilizing a more urban configuration for these, where you have sidewalks and doors on the street and the parking is in the back. So this is sort of a home run project for me.
What's the will of the commission on this?
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item number 5, a request to rezone 508, 510, 512, and 516 McCray Streets from CB to R3 conditional. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal increases housing supply while protecting desired neighborhood character through infill development. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Commissioner Adams has moved to approve Agenda Item 5. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Further discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes 4-0. All right. Any items from the commission? Sure. Commissioner Cofer.
This little speaker box that says "Do not adjust volume," that's how we hear from these mics. Is it true that we cannot adjust the volume? Can I turn it up a little bit? Because I have a hard time hearing some of the speakers as they come and go. Is that an Amy question?
It's my understanding that all of the microphones are set by the sound booth that's up top and controlled by people that are not on the floor here.
Okay.
Brian has a little bit of control, but he has to be very careful because the ringing and the backlash from the mics can get rough depending on how high or low he
That's okay.
does it.
I just wanted to double check
That's
because
why
I
I
just
do-
move it close to me and I kind of get
I
close
do
to
try
it.
really hard to remind people to go to the microphone.
You do a great job of that.
Thank you.
Because I can hear them from here, so I don't always notice that they're not in the mic, so. Anything else from the commission? Commissioner Lennon?
I have about a dozen items. No, I'm just kidding. I guess my only comment is that if anybody's still watching, I wish the public hearings could go like the last three did, as opposed to item number 3. This is just a plea, if anybody's watching, yelling out and disrupting a meeting does zero to impact the outcome. So I think we could have gotten through tonight a lot quicker if if the public had conducted themselves in a way that sort of honored the process that's gone on long before all of us. That's it.
All right, items from the staff?
And
Would you speak into the microphone, please?
I turned it on. So the only update we have for you is, as I'm sure you heard, we held a community meeting a couple of weeks ago on June 27th to discuss one of the amendments we had proposed as part of the last LDC amendment package related to legacy districts and impervious surface coverage and density, and removing a density cap in certain areas based on CAMA land use classification. We had heard for about 2 hours of community input on that, and there were a lot of concerns regarding flooding and stormwater and other things that the community thinks we really need to take more into account. We came back, we went through all of the comments and the feedback that we received, and our recommendation to the council will be to withdraw that proposed amendment from consideration. It will be on the second meeting in August for the city council, which I believe is August 20th, but staff's recommendation is to withdraw that amendment at this time.
Commissioner Lennon?
What are the negative ramifications to that?
This was staff initiated, so I don't know that there really are any negative ramifications to that. This was an attempt for us to try and bring some consistency between the legacy districts and the way the current code is written, but the legacy districts are part of the old code. They are inconsistent, I would say, probably in a lot of different ways in terms of the regulations that they have, because they're subject to different standards than you are if you're in the current code.
Okay, so it's okay if you don't go forward with the amendment, or it's not, I mean, I guess if it was important enough to bring up to Planning Commission and ultimately to council, and yes, I know there was a tremendous amount of public backlash, but what happens if it doesn't get moved forward? What are the downsides? I mean, there's got to be some downside because there was an upside to bringing it forward the first time, right?
Again, we were trying to be proactive in this in terms of proposing something to improve consistency. There wasn't anything that we were looking at that was saying, you know, oh, this needs to be changed. It wasn't based on a comment that someone said, hey, can you change this? This is impacting my project. This was something that staff came up with on our own, and we're being proactive. So there's no impacts that I'm aware of, and I'll let Brian answer if he has anything else.
I think the impact would be measured on a project-specific basis. I think what we've realized is trying to amend these legacy districts is a lot more complicated than we initially thought. Like Linda mentioned, there are quite a few probably inconsistencies across those two codes. There's a reason why we have legacy districts. We didn't want to rezone those because of the complexities that would be involved in doing so. We've got a lot of mixed-use areas that were been being built out and continue to be built out over 20 years under the same development standards. That's why we didn't want to change them and make them legacy districts. What we've realized is if we start to tweak that, it really kind of opens up a larger can of worms that I think was the intention of why we left them in legacy districts.
So the legacy districts will be protected.
The legacy districts will remain intact.
One of the concerns I had was because I was at that meeting, and a lot of the components of MX in particular were, why is this a bonus? Why is that a bonus? But what I'm hearing you say is those legacy districts will continue to stand alone.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else from the commission or the staff, I'd love a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Lennon with the motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed to that one? We are